start?
Yeah.
Start is not productive.
No, it's not.
It's not.
Yeah, unfortunately, the budget.
Not taking that home, but
Just wondering if that all that
this next time we have this meeting, is that right?
broken down by south.
I don't know. I just got here.
It's not online.
I think this is all Title VII. I think. I'm sorry. I think this is all the Title VII stuff. Is what it looks like.
Give to you. We probably one of our spreadsheets is very complex because there's it's a Excel spreadsheet.
I'm not sure I like that.
Okay, can I send it to you and let you forward it to me? You would like a breakdown?
You have grandma hair. I know. One of her little kids told her. I know you're old because you have grandma hair.
Who?
So that's Chris. One of her kids.
Go ahead and kick off. Okay, good evening, everybody. Are we recording yet? We are? Great. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the City Council study session. Our first agenda item is Arapahoe County Assessor TIF discussion. I believe we're expecting...
right here at the table, Mayor.
Excellent. Corbin Zachdahl and Deputy Chief Assessor Monica Babbitt present to discuss projected property tax to be generated through the Inglewood Industrial Urban Renewal Area in 2017 and beyond. Good evening. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Monica Babbitt. I'm Deputy Assessor of Administration. Corbin is not with us today, but our Chief Deputy Assessor, Mark Scott, is available.
Evening. Thank you. We have. I thought of giving you a little bit of background on Inglewood Ironworks. That's our active Inglewood TIF at this time, and then just kind of fast forward to where we're at today. Will that work for you?
I just have a question of protocol here. Do they need to stand up there? Are we trying to get everybody taped, or does it matter, or is it fine there? They're just being recorded.
They do have a microphone that's on the table.
They're just not going to be on the video, right?
No, they will be on video.
From that, they will be.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Please continue.
Sure. Back in the year 2000, we received a notification from the City of Inglewood of the Urban Renewal and Tax Increment Finance for North Inglewood Industrial Redevelopment. It was adopted January 2001. Arapahoe County set the base for the area, and then we began calculating forward. To this date, we don't have any increment developed on the property, which means there's been no new development to this property. We have just continued to grab the current value. Lorette?
I believe that there has been new development to it. It's just a government development. We have the RTD station, don't we?
We do have the RTD station, yeah.
It's my understanding that it didn't create increment because government doesn't pay taxes.
Right.
Right.
The only thing that increment can develop from is taxable value. So,
Okay.
The taxes that are collected is when it's dispersed.
Council, if I could get you to wait for recognition from me for questions for our guests,
we're missing
please.
our little block thing. I'm sorry.
You can press your button to request to speak at this time. Please continue.
Okay.
Hold on one second. Let me press the button because some of the council members might have missed your answer while they were worrying about me pressing the button. So could you give the explanation again?
No, ma'am. Please stop and let our guests continue.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. As of today's date, we have no taxable value, no taxable increment. Okay. So that means taxable new development to the area. Into that, we do realize there is a construction going on at this time for, I believe, the Founders. So we are looking, we will pick that up in 2017 as new construction. But that property is under the ownership of Inglewood Housing Authority. That is an exempt entity, so it will not draw increment value.
it'll be exempt value, and we cannot calculate increment based on that value. That is where we're at. I can't give, unfortunately, I don't have 2017 values available. We're in the process, and Mark can speak more to that. The appraisers are now in the field collecting information and reassessing for the tax year 2017.
Yeah, if I could, the 2017 tax year values will be established after the first of the year. And on May 1st, we will send out notice evaluations to all the property owners in Arapahoe. Any new construction in ironworks will be picked up as of January 1, 2017. And the base or increment adjusted at that time. But what we see so far is there's no new construction that we see. We just were through there the other day. That would appear to be taxable new construction that we would pick up in 2017. So if that were the case, there would be no new construction for 17. And the values would essentially stay the same. So the earliest we could pick up construction might be 2018, for taxes payable in 2019.
And to that, the current base value is $3,043,732. The 26 assessed value was $2,575,439. So the current value is about $468,000 under the base value. So in order for increment to start being available, it has to exceed the current base. It has to come out of that $468,000 deficit, and then it'll start calculating increment. We show the life of the TIF at 9 more years, then it will expire. Is there any questions you all have?
Yes, please. Questions from council. Councilmember Barrington.
When I first found out about this being, that it was going to be collecting increment, it was my understanding that you guys had some kind of formula, and that's why Corbin thought that there would be some generated for 2017. If there's some kind of formula about, that so much of the project, once it starts breaking ground, why hasn't that happened? Because when the project is finished, it will exceed that.
You're correct.
Increment base.
What changes this, and when I believe you were at the city discussion, if it was taxable value in 2017, it most definitely there would be increment value. But with the property being owned under Inglewood Housing Authority, it is exempt. And when a property, we cannot calculate increment off of exempt value. Now, that's just the current development going on.
Do you guys have the paperwork available that shows that this property is owned by Inglewood Housing? Because they did an agreement with them, with Inglewood Housing, but Inglewood Housing doesn't own this property.
Sounds like Mr. Keck would like to chime in.
I have an answer for that because I just recently found out, not dissimilarly, that the Medici-Acoma Lofts project also has a small ownership interest, which makes it exempt from sales and use tax. And one of the questions I had, and I'm hoping that our friends from the county can help us with this tonight, my understanding is that EHA only has a $100 interest in the Medici Lofts project as well as the Foundry project, and whether $100 is enough to make that an exemption for the property tax.
So the letter we have, and our legal has been working with Scott Yates from the Foundry Apartments. This letter describes the property as 100% affordable housing serving households that earn less than 60%. And the title, I believe, was under the name. So we looked in the Assessor's Reference Library, which dictates, it governs the assessor. And at first I was wondering if this was an automatic exemption or did they have to apply, and it is an automatic exemption under a statute 291204.2. Oh, no, I'm sorry. 29,4226. They're 100% exempt.
Okay, we'll have to look at the paperwork that they brought to us because it was my understanding it was a partnership, not a, and that they're not 100% affordable housing, that it was a portion of it that was going to be. So I guess we got hoodwinked again.
Other questions from council? Councilmember Olson.
I remember that it started out as this and then changed in the very, very beginning. So I'm wondering if we're dealing, what dates are on those documents?
August 3rd, 2016.
No, that's not right.
And I did bring a copy with our information.
Councilmember Barentine.
Because Linda Olson was the liaison on that during that project when they were getting that contract together, and everything that we heard wasn't that. So is there a possibility we could get some more information and get it to you and figure this out?
Sure, and once you figure that out, you can get a hold of us. I do know that our appraiser over land, over apartments, Mike Williams is his name. He has been working with Scott from the Foundry, and our
Scott
legal,
Yates,
Ben Schwartzendruber is our assistant county attorney. And they have determined that this was exempt. They actually called the state, the Division of Property Taxation, and they advised them that this is an exempt entity.
Okay. To do that for $100 and bypass paying the city the tax, I guess, obviously, you're aware that this is the first we're hearing about it. Yeah, surprise. That's all I had.
Thank you. Other questions from council? I guess I'd try to wrap that up one more time. So I heard you say that that you didn't think there would be any increment generated next year, based on the idea that the apartments that are being developed are tax exempt. Would another development be required in order to generate an increment, or would simply the entire property's valuation could go up and generate an increment?
It has to be an adjustment not due to reassessment. So that means new construction, exempt to taxable. There are several items. A new plat coming in, changing property from residential to commercial, changes in classification are all reasons why increment can be developed.
I guess I'm just trying to get my arms around where we're at in that process. The bulk of the site or the remainder of the site is gone through a PUD for some new entitlements and is looking to be developed into for ownership housing in the near future is what we expect. And so, I guess the question is, have those entitlements generated an increased property value that's going to generate an increment moving forward? And I'm not
exactly right.
You do suspect that
would, yes.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just run that by Mr. Comer, right? I mean, you would think that PUD amendment or granting, would that PUD amendment that we did to amend the PUD change the entitlements so much, do you think, where that would change the assessment situation?
Honestly, I don't know. I'd have to look at it and talk.
That might be a council request for us to try to figure out exactly where we're at in that process of entitlements and generation of an increment. I guess I just mean, recall that this property was going from industrial use and got approved for a PUD years ago, which gave additional land rights to that property to be able to develop residential properties. And just recently, we did an amendment to that PUD that granted some additional changes to that PUD. And so I guess I'm just wondering if we view that change in entitlement as something that's going to generate an increment. Because again, I guess what we're trying to do is predict when an increment is coming forward, if and when, and that way we can try to decide from a management perspective how we want to deal with that. So. Other questions or, I suppose, comments from council at this point? Council, anybody else? Councilmember Barentine?
Even if this is a tax-exempt property, when this is finished, would it still create the increment?
Increment is calculated off of taxable value.
Okay, which is why the RTD station never created any increment, a huge building like that, new development on that. But the other ones, we thought it would be on this one, but we didn't know that they were exempt until you just told us. So actually, we thought that an increment was going to happen, and now we're getting new information. But the other project that goes in there for the townhomes, unless they pony up with the Inglewood Housing Authority and become tax exempt too, that project would create increments. So that's what you're expecting. But we may still not have a problem. They may partner with the Inglewood Housing, and we won't get anything on it at all, so then it won't be a problem.
That's correct. The way increment is diverted or the way it's distributed is property taxes are collected. The base value is going to be your $3 million. That will go times the levy into the authorities. So City of Inglewood, Arapahoe County, Inglewood School District, RTD, whatever authorities are in there. The value above the base is calculated against the jurisdiction's levy, and that goes to the Urban Renewal Authority. So when this new development occurs it sounds like it's west of the Foundry Apartments, these townhomes the value of that increase will be increment value. It has to rise above the $400,000 deficit in order to become increment value for the authorities. It has to rise above the base.
I think that any substantial redevelopment, of course, would get us over that base. And so I guess, thinking out loud, I feel like probably the next question is, how much increment potentially could be generated over that 9-year period, again, to try to give us an idea of, what the potential of this could be. How do you think, is there any way you think to pencil that, or, how do you advise that maybe we think about that issue? Do you have any thoughts on that?
We would have to know what the development is.
Yeah, that's a hard one. It would essentially be the market value of all new construction. There's a lot of vacant land in this area, so there's potential. Outside of the residential area behind the apartments, it's either redevelopment on a small scale, or it would be Winslow area, Crane. So it's anyone's guess as to what got built.
Well, we have.
Though there's enough of a lag. Excuse me. If you broke ground on this residential project, and it was after January 1, we wouldn't pick it up till January 1 of 18.
Okay.
So we could burn another year or two out of that 9. So by the time it does come up, all you'd collect would be that remaining, say, 7 years.
And is breaking ground the determining factor for that? If the groundbreaking is prior to January 1, or is it substantial construction, or what's kind of the rule there as far as when that existed?
We look at the project on January 1. For example, the Foundry Apartments. They won't be finished probably by January 1 of 17. So we'll put a percentage completion on it. In this case, we might put 80% completion. So 80% of that finished value will show up in the 2017 action. And the following year, the other 20% will show up.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Other questions or comments from council? Councilmember Olson?
So for the, I guess this is to us on our council request, could we get a short brief of the decision points, because things did change, just a reminder, because this goes back quite a ways. I don't know how far back. It's your district, so, I mean, were you aware of this at all? Is this a surprise to you tonight that there's not accruing on
that
it?
they were tax exempt, I suppose so.
You did know that?
But honestly, this issue has been talked about without flushing out the facts, so I didn't really, I knew that there might be some new information, so I'm not totally taken aback, I guess is all I'm saying.
Wow. Okay. Well, I would like to, and just a one-page brief is fine of, what were the points of time, because it started a while back before at least 3 of our members were on council. So, but I guess I just didn't realize that that's what it was.
You guys have clarity on that? Councilmember Barrington?
I think we need more than just a one-page thing. It's obvious that you guys didn't realize that that was the case. You asked them to come here to tell us how much money we would be collecting on the TIF after a couple of meetings, and you went and talked to Corbin Sackdahl, and everything that we had about that project said nothing about that. There was a couple of units, and they were partnering with Inglewood Housing, and I feel like we got hoodwinked. We need to have better people watching over, figuring out what we're doing with that. Inglewood Housing, that's just outrageous to find out this way.
You know what? It is outrageous, and we found out about it just this past week, to be frank. So, council member, I hope you're not...
well, I don't think you hit anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just
because
surprised.
I'll say this. I only found out about it as we talked with Medici, and they submitted an appeal of their building use, sales and use tax that they were required to pay in order to obtain their permit. And I said, what is this appeal about? And they said, well, it's a legislative change. It just happened this past legislative session that they got some opinion of the legislature that if they are providing low-income housing tax credit property to persons, whether it's no matter what AMI they're talking about, that exemption not only covers the property tax, but it covers building sales and use tax. And so that was a complete surprise. And so as we kept digging, we found out that there was only a $100 ownership. That seems to be a pretty low threshold or a bar for somebody to clear in order to obtain such a huge windfall, if you will, for the development.
For them to ask for it, for them to go and get the exemption, they knew.
Well, they sure did, yeah.
Yeah, they knew. And it would appear that at least some people in the Inglewood Housing Authority knew. And, I mean, that's our board, staffed by people that we appoint, and we're not getting that kind of information to figure out what that board is doing. And we're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars now on 2 projects with absolutely no income coming in. I mean, wow.
You know, I'm not sure if that's fair. I mean, perhaps we should know the rules of affordable housing projects as well. So, again, they know the rule, we should know the rule as well, and so I don't view it as us being hoodwinked necessarily by them. Councilmember Olson.
It sounds to me like you found out some new information, that something kicked in for them based on a new legislative decision that was made in this last legislative year, and we just weren't aware of that or privy to it, because I don't remember this conversation at all. And if you actually knew this was coming, I'm all the more surprised.
Sorry. Are you? You asked me if I knew this property was tax exempt, and I said no. So why is it all about what I know? I mean, why are you inquiring on this forum about what I know?
Do you want to know the answer to that?
Yes.
Okay, I thought that you said that you did kind of know that this was coming.
No, you didn't hear me correctly then.
Okay, so sorry.
If you're going to ask me questions.
Okay, thank you. Then that's a good clarification, because I did think that's what you said, okay. So I'm glad to know. I mean, I really did. So that's why I said that. I thought,
again,
wow.
I guess all I said was that the fact that they were tax exempt was news to me. Again, I guess I'm just saying that I didn't think that we had flushed out this issue totally, and so that's why we're having these meetings. And to think that we knew everything, prior to all of these series of meetings, I think is, putting the cart
I would
before the horse.
hope we would. I mean, I hope going in the future we would. I mean, we make mistakes. I think everybody makes mistakes. I'm not trying to shame anybody or anything in this. I'm trying to get at what happened. And I don't know if Mayor Pro Tem Gillett heard anything on an Inglewood Housing Authority, because I never did.
They don't know anything about this.
I have a feeling they don't either. So So I just had to clarify that there was something new that you found out this week that sort of put something in it. May be that because they did get that special, we signed a letter. We all agreed to the letter that they went to the state for on this a while back for some kind of a...
I think you're referring to the Chaffa letter.
Not the Chaffa, because then they didn't get that, right?
No, they did get
No, they
Chaffa.
did get that.
They did.
But it did not have this in it.
No, it did not.
No. So, I mean... And that was a lower level. So anyway, it's just great to hear that not great to hear, but it's good to know that there was something that you think kicked in, and we just need to get that information. I don't know if you're familiar with the law that might have kicked in for this. Not to that level? Okay, well, this would be helpful to know. I do think we should get all the, ins and outs of this to make sure we don't repeat it again, because we certainly shouldn't be signing agreement letters like this and then get caught after the fact.
Well, we know you know.
Sorry, is there a suggestion that there was an agreement letter signed by us agreeing to make them tax exempt? I mean, again, I think...
No, there's no such thing.
Yeah.
It's again, it's a supremacy clause. Stuff rolls downhill. This was legislation done at the state level. We got outflanked clearly because none of us knew this. Had we have known this, we might have been able to advise you as counsel, as you negotiated with these individuals, to not cede anything, like giving back the park and lieu fees, then something like that. We would have said, don't do anything of that nature because we're going to stand to lose significant money with this exemption. So again, counsel, I understand your frustration. We're just as frustrated because we're just finding out about this as well.
So was there a letter of support to make them tax exempt from?
Not to my knowledge.
Not from us.
But didn't we do a letter of support for Chaffa?
Letter of support for Chaffa, that's
Yeah.
different.
That's very different. That is
No,
a
I know,
very
but that's
different
what I'm
issue.
talking about. We did not know at the point that we did the supportive letter that that's what.
Fair enough.
That was the rule.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Agreed.
But we
Agreed.
did do that support letter, so.
We did for CHAFA funding, which is different than tax exempt status. But I'm going to move on to Councilmember Yates.
Just for a point of clarification, this ruling happened within the past year, where it kind of changes this whole scenario.
To my knowledge, yes, that is the case. And again, nothing transpired until this past legislative session for a particular clarification on the intent of legislation relating to low-income housing tax credit property and the taxes that they pay not only for property tax, but also for building sales and use tax.
So actually, we had a lot of this stuff in play before that ruling ever came down.
All of it was in play before that ruling came into it.
So there's really no way that we could have known. I mean, we were just broadsided.
Well, it depends on how big of a public process I suppose there was on that issue, and perhaps, there needs to be a little bit of information for council regarding, what rule we're talking about, what judgment, what legislative action we're talking about, how that came to be, and some historical information about that, because as everybody's pointed out, this is all news to all of us, so let's make sure we understand the issue here. Do you have something else, Councilmember Yates?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So there's $100 that allows them to take advantage of this. If that $100 vested interest in it would change, would the tax roll change on that?
Well, we need to look at the deed, because I'm assuming the deed taking title to this property is in the name of Inglewood Housing Authority. This letter that they provided us is telling us that the property is 100% affordable housing. So we would have to, if less than this $100, we would probably have to get with the state, with the Division of Property Taxation. But there is not, the county is not, we don't have jurisdiction to monitor or to allow that exemption. So.
Okay. So the question would be, where do we go from here to see if Urban Renewal would be willing to sign over their $100 over to the builders, and how does that change the contract? And excuse me, Miss Lorette Barentine, what?
Councilmember Barentine, and it's Inglewood Housing Authority, not Urban Renewal Authority.
Sorry, I got the name wrong. I apologize. So I guess the question would be is, how do we go about, if we can, just change that one specific thing around and bring it back onto the tax rolls?
I think that, if you don't mind, I would suggest that council request might give us some information about that. Again, I guess I'm just concerned that we don't understand this issue before we're attempting to discuss this issue. And so, again, I guess I would suggest to the council that we get some information. We learned some new information about the tax-exempt status of one of the properties in the Urban Renewal Authority. We'll get some additional information regarding the increment and information about, how perhaps we view these moving forward, and that might help us in another conversation regarding this, is my thought. Did you have something, Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. I think you heard also this evening that even with additional development that may transpire there, and as we heard Mr. Foy from Boulevard Builders speak, he has 2 years' worth of infrastructure work he has to do, so we're probably not going to see any construction begin until late 2018. If that were the case, as you heard tonight, the taxes are even further in arrears collected, and you have 9 years left. This is not going to leave too much increment to be generated from this housing that will not be publicly sponsored by the housing authority. This would be fair market value housing. We're not going to see that much increment generated from this district, and I think that was one of the things that we wanted to hear this evening so that we could move then forward, if councils has consensus, to bring forth the resolution to close this particular area so that we're not going to have any confusion for the county or for us if increment were to be generated in the future. That's the question that was before you as well. The county's presence here just affirms that, that could be problematic in the future.
Agreed. Thank you for that. Councilmember Russell?
Actually, I have a question mostly for staff, and maybe this should be a council request. When did the rule come down? And, I want to know when it was in the works and if they could have known about it, because there were a lot of delays that took us into July. So I think it would be important for us to know that.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington?
I appreciate you guys coming down, and you were asked to come down and tell us how much increment we were doing and what the process is, and you've done that. I greatly appreciate. Obviously, you knew about what was going on because you knew it was tax exempt, and you checked and went through the stuff. I appreciate the information. As for the rest of it, it was our board. It's our responsibility to know what they're doing, and all of the lack of communication and not sharing of information and acting separate out of here and not paying attention to what they're doing has cost us. So I guess that has nothing to do with you, but I do appreciate that you came and gave us the news. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Staff is, asking perhaps for some direction on how to proceed with the, urban renewal area currently. Do we want to try to have some discussion and give some direction to staff on this issue this evening? Ask other members to weigh in. Again, I feel like it's difficult making that decision just because we don't know, how much increment could potentially be generated and what type of project then might make sense for this area. Is there any thoughts on that, Mr. Tech, as far as...
Yes, Mayor and Council, I'm pretty much a literalist as it comes to urban renewal. If the plan did not enunciate any public improvements at the time it was approved by the Urban Renewal Authority, there shouldn't, and there wasn't anything that needed to be reimbursed, then we have no need for this particular area to exist at this point in time. I think if we were to try to project forward into the future what types of improvements were needed, we just had a presentation, 3 weeks ago by the special district attorneys talking about how most of the infrastructure is going to be private and privately maintained. That's not to say that there couldn't be something we could dream up. Staff could always come up with some sort of project within that area that could then force an amendment to the plan that would allow for that collection. But I don't believe there's just enough time for anything to be accomplished within this next 9 years. Specifically, it's probably more like 6 years before you're going to see any tax increment, and it's going to be too small in order to do a pedestrian bridge over Dartmouth or something like that may support that area. So again, I'm going out on a limb perhaps by saying that I don't think there's a necessity to keep this area open.
And I think that's the determination, the council needs to make, but I guess you saying that it's not going to create enough increment to pay for a pedestrian bridge, do you know that for certain? I guess I haven't been presented that information.
Well, pedestrian bridges, Mayor, we know pedestrian bridges right now, specifically the one for Dartmouth, is probably going to be a little bit north of $1 million. And so to create a $1 million worth of increment, that's a lot of homes in a very short period of time.
I guess I just don't know how many homes that is. And so, again, in my mind, I'd love somebody just to pencil that out, that logic for me, so that I could follow that. Because if I can agree that, the increment's not going to get anywhere near to finance anything substantial, then perhaps we can make that determination now. Going to go to, I think it's Councilmember Barentine and then Olson,
You missed the first part that the city manager said, and he said that if you follow the law says it's got to be part of the plan when it was presented in the first place. Pedestrian bridge wasn't. We don't go after the fact and start looking for things to spend money on. It is supposed to be for what the plan was developed for, and if it's not in there, then according to the law, the money reverts back to the municipality. And it isn't just shutting the plan down. If there is no plan, there is no urban renewal board. There isn't a reason for a board. The board is created to execute the plan. When the plan is executed, if the plan stops, there's no reason for a board anymore. They get to watch Monday Night Football and enjoy their lives because they've done their job. And if another situation comes up where there is slum and blight or one of the 11 categories that needs to be dealt with in an urban renewal plan, then you get the 25 signatures, we create another urban renewal authority, and we create another plan. But once this plan is done, then we need to shut the board down, revert that money back to the municipality, and move on and celebrate that the job is finished. So when you keep going on about...
If you don't mind, let me ask a clarifying question then to Mr. Cromer to verify.
So what I would like to see done is the money reverted back to the municipality and go ahead and close down the plan and then the Urban Renewal Board and keep it as a tool in our toolbox when it and if it should come up again.
Thank you. Mr. Comer, if I could ask a clarifying question regarding that. Is it, acceptable for the city or the urban renewal body to consider projects for these funds, or since it wasn't identified at the time that the area was designated, is it not appropriate to look for new projects? Am I thinking about a square peg in a round hole?
I'd have to look at the law to make sure that we can do that.
I think we need a council request on that then, because I feel like that is ultimately going to be critical to this decision making. Councilmember Olson.
Mayor, I agree with you on that last couple of statements and the question you asked, and I'm a little bit confused with the agenda tonight, because I thought we were getting an update on the TIF, which we've received. Unfortunately, you're sitting here watching us try and figure out something else that was not on the agenda, which is deciding about urban renewal. And I get how they connect, but I don't think, I certainly would want more people to know that we're talking about whether or not we're going to, make some major change here without some input. I don't mind doing that if we think it's the right thing to do. I don't mind at all doing that. But I don't think that's what was on the agenda tonight, nor is there backup information on why we're doing this at this point. And it might be just exactly as you say, but I think it would be unfortunate if we sort of gave direction tonight in that area without having this really clear on the agenda. It's just not open and transparent. I don't say
point of clarification then, Council. Tonight's purpose, as I understood it, was direction from Council several weeks ago when we first discussed the matter of closing the Inglewood Iron Works or Inglewood Industrial Area, was to have the county come and provide insight into projected increment generation. That's what this is this evening. I don't believe that I was advocating for the complete demolishment or disbandment of the Urban Renewal Authority. However, this area was the topic that we discussed before, and that's why we're here this evening.
Given the fact that
we'll note that the agenda does note this as a discussion item, and to Councilmember's point, I think that perhaps this is something, if we do want to take an action on this item perhaps should be rescheduled for a further discussion, I would suggest.
And in response to that, which is really helpful, Manager, but I think because of the new information that we're receiving tonight and how confusing it is, we need to visit this one more time to do it the right way.
Councilmember Barrington?
And I just want to note, in the original letter that you sent after you had talked to Corbin Sackdahl and even realized that there was a TIF area, that's exactly the options that you gave, were that we needed to make a decision prior to the first of the year because you were being told by the county assessor that more than likely, before everybody knew that, and that's in the original letter that you said, closing down the Urban Renewal Authority. We've been talking about this for months. And then the decision was, well, we need to find out whether we're going to have any increment to make that decision. And then when everybody, it just delays everything when everybody goes, nope, had no clue. We asked them to come to give us the financial piece of this so that we could decide whether we wanted to close the plan down. That's what was said in inviting them. So I don't understand why we keep reinventing the wheel just to waste time.
Are you asking me a question? Or others?
Yeah, if you can answer it.
I'm not trying to waste time. I'm trying to be very clear about what we're deciding and why. And I think that's an important thing. If we waited 2 more weeks, it won't be a big deal. There's some information we got tonight that is really disturbing to some of us. And I think, you may have known about it before. I don't know if you understood it as being what it is.
Oh, no,
I didn't.
I think I made it pretty clear. I was surprised by it. But the exempt piece of that had nothing to do with wanting to close it down. So I didn't see it as an integral piece of that.
Oh. Anyway, I would stand by what I said. I just really think another 2 weeks won't be bad for us to figure this out and get it done correctly. And if we've made so many mistakes before, then it's better that we be careful and doesn't slow things down.
Others want to weigh in on wanting to give direction or having a separate meeting here? Mayor Pro Tem Gillett?
I would agree with Linda. I think right now our agenda is to discuss TIF, not kind of the information we found out. I think we need some time to find out what's going on. And that way we can have an intelligent conversation amongst ourselves and with city staff of what's going on. And I'd prefer to thank our guests for coming. They've done their part tonight, and we move on with the agenda.
Okay, yeah, I do think that we will bring this back for further discussion at a later date, pending some additional information from staff regarding the legality of, looking at projects, the scope of the increment to be generated, just some idea. It doesn't need to be, obviously, I wouldn't tell you to go spend too much time on that. A very rough penciling of something might give us an idea that there might not be enough increment generated, just as you suspect. Councilmember Barrington.
Could we get the contracts that EHA signed and when they had the obviously these two developers knew what they were doing when they ponied up with EHA, and I believe EHA knew that too. And so if we could get the contracts, and then if we could get the plans, because they were not submitted as 100% low-income housing, so we need to make sure that what's going on with that piece of it.
You're talking not about the area plans, but the plan specific for these developments, correct? The Medici and the Foundry? Is that what you're talking about? Or your urban renewal plans?
Right.
Okay.
The urban renewal plan, because the plan had to fit within that urban renewal, and then what they did with the agreement that they made with EHA that created this, and how they had the authority to do this.
Okay.
Other thoughts on how to move this forward, or any additional information we might need to make a decision here? It didn't sound to me like this was, the odds of an increment being generated as of January 1 seem pretty low, right? I mean, there's actually zero chance of that happening because we're using the assessment from last year, right?
That's right. I realistically wouldn't expect any, well, there's probably none in 16.
Right, there's 0 in 16.
Realistically, I wouldn't expect any in 17.
And And I think that was our concern from our organization, was that, hey, we really need to pony up, make a decision about this before January 1. Hearing from our guest tonight that no increment is going to be generated, I'm going to suggest that we obviously pick this conversation back up soon, but it might not be the next meeting. It'll be a fairly high priority, though, in my mind. Thank you again for coming this evening and providing some information to the council. We genuinely appreciate it. Let's see. Our next discussion is agenda item 2, aid to other agencies discussion. City Manager Keck is present to discuss aid to other agencies. And I brought my sheet here to try to help take some notes.
Yeah, so you have before you, Council, a spreadsheet that allows you to enter in some data with respect to these applicants who have made application for the aid to other agencies, as well as the actual applications themselves for the entities that have applied this year. And as you will see, there are several new entities that actually have applied for the 2016 potential disbursement of your monies. Again, you have $20,000 to disperse between all these entities. And so tonight is just an opportunity for the council to look at these and determine if you want to move forward with which ones you'd like to move forward with and which amount, so that we have the ability to execute on that.
Would council prefer to go through the list as of the spreadsheet that was provided, or through the applications in the order of applications? They're slightly different. One's alphabetical and one's, I'm not really sure exactly how, but does anybody have a preference? Does everybody, if we filled this out, I would prefer to go through this, but if we haven't, then let's go through the applications is my thought. I'm going to suggest the applications.
I have a question first.
Yes, please go ahead.
When we did the budget discussion, you said that there would still be some discussion, even if the budget passed or didn't pass, on whether we were still going to go ahead and allocate monies to that had been discussed quite a bit, with the aid to other agencies and the Museum of Outdoor Arts money. And now we just seem to not be having any discussion about it after we had a lot of discussion about whether to even do this or not. And the only reason that it moved forward was because the city manager had to go ahead and put the applications out. But we were still in discussions about whether we were even going to allocate these funds or not. So I'm not sure where that discussion ended up.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, particularly since we do not have an approved budget yet for 2017. I suppose that, on the front end of this, we could have that conversation. I think the intent, or at least my intent, and I think of staff's, was to have the discussion regarding the two issues that were pulled out of the budget, including the MOA funding and the aid to other agencies funding, to have those discussions prior to approval. In my mind, that was supposed to happen last week, and so, that would have been, but again, since it hasn't formally been passed, I would suggest that it's still a potential conversation topic. I would like to make it brief, if we would, at the front end here, if you'd like to make some comments regarding aid to other agencies funding altogether. But again, the budget will be coming back to us next week.
It was at that meeting that, whether it passed or didn't pass, because of what happened, that you said we can allocate the money, but that doesn't mean that we will disperse it. That's what you said, so that's what
I see what you mean. Okay. What I was suggesting was that just because it had been approved and allocated doesn't mean that we need to give it all away. That's what I was saying.
Or any of it away. But we were having a conversation, and then it got waylaid, and if we can continue on with that.
Sure. In my mind, that discussion about how much to allocate begins with the first agency.
Okay. And I don't agree with you. I think that the conversation before we were having was whether we should be doing the aid to other agencies at all as a government entity. And I'm going...
And we can have that discussion now if you'd like.
Okay, it'll be short. I'm sticking with that because apparently you don't want to do that. You want to do that as agencies, and I don't want to pick any one person out of here and say that I think they're better or not. I have made a list of people to contact that I'll be volunteering and providing funding on my own, but I don't think it's the role of the government to pick and choose winners and losers out of the nonprofit organizations, whether they serve our people or our communities or other communities. They're all do amazing jobs, and the community supports them as they see fit, but we shouldn't be doing it with tax dollars. So I'll not be participating in that discussion at all because I don't think we should be giving out that money.
Thank you for that. Others would like to maybe respond or discuss that issue prior to us getting into the first agency. Councilmember Russell?
Actually, I have made this clear before, too, a couple of times, that I really do not think it is the role of government to be supporting charitable organizations. And I'm not saying I agree with Councilmember Barentine. All of these are worthy. They have a place. But I just don't think it is wise for government agencies to do that.
Appreciate that. You know, I think this is something that previous councils had discussed when I came on. I think the budget was 40 or 50,000. Obviously, the proposed budget for 2017 is down to 20. I think that we need to take a hard look at each of these agencies and decide on a case-by-case basis whether they're worth funding. I think from a macro or philosophical kind of standpoint of why we do this is because there are some social needs here locally, and that obviously we're not able to fund comprehensive social services programs here at the municipal level. I think the idea is to partner up with some private sector businesses, nonprofits, to deliver these social services to the community and let them know that we support them and buy into that mission. And so, again, from my perspective, I don't totally disagree. There's some that probably are a little more direct benefit to the community than others. And so, in my mind, that's why I want to have, I think, the discussion about each agency. And again, going back to my comment, just because, potentially we'll allocate 20,000 for this doesn't mean that we need to give away 20,000 if we don't feel like we're getting good return on our investment there from any of these. Anybody else like to chime in here? I would like to try to get some consensus to proceed with this process. Just to move on with the first agency. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, so I would like to proceed now at this point. Again, if nobody has a preference.
Can I just?
Yeah, please go ahead.
One way to go at this, if we have, in general, we know ones that we don't, if there are any categories we want to just say we're not going to do that anymore. I don't know if anybody's thought of anything like that. In the past, we have done that, and it's helped us kind of sift through. Here's one of mine. I'll throw it out there.
Fair enough. Thank you. Get us started.
Can't believe I'm doing this. I really wonder about giving money to churches. And so that's where I'd like it. But the hard part for me is that some of them are food. Programs I don't think we should be paying for, but food is different. And so that's where I struggle the most. So if there was some traction there, I'd be in agreement to saying, let's not do that anymore. But I don't know what you think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. That we did see some
everything
new.
when you take those out.
Yeah, we do take some kind of new applications for event kind of oriented stuff from some church organizations. So, I kind of took the approach of if there was ones that I thought were somewhat questionable, but I thought that there was a benefit to the community, I funded them at $100 in my list here, to try to show some partnership and support for what they're doing, but recognizing that that's probably not where we want to allocate our resources. And so, for example, the kids' night I had at $100, Kids Fest, thank you, I had at $100, for example. Anybody else want to weigh in on maybe some of the new applications we've got? I did want to clarify another thing. Gateway was not in there, huh? But I see them on the list. I see them on the list, but I don't see their application.
That one didn't come late, did it? Because I didn't see them either. I mean, yeah, none of us saw it.
Yeah, spreadsheet. Yeah, I don't know what happened with that application. Good call.
We'll come back to
the one that did come in late was the Inglewood Arts.
Okay, it wasn't that one. That's what I was trying to figure out.
Inglewood Arts came in 2 days late.
Did it just perhaps not get in our packet? I didn't notice it until today, so.
The Gateway?
Yeah.
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay.
I apologize.
Might have
for that.
gotten it, but maybe we're just missing it.
Yeah, no problem. We can probably loop back around. Others want to comment perhaps on some of the new applications, or do you want to just jump into the first?
If my idea didn't matter to anybody else, then let's just tube it and go on.
you know, I asked that a couple years ago, same question, so I would not mind that one, nor because we have healthcare provided pretty much for the government for needy people. I would say that definitely don't want it like doctor's care. I'm sure they do it. We didn't give anything last time either. But I agree. And I also said last time that I don't like, that I have a hard time giving to school things because the school gets their own funding.
Yeah.
Yep, those three, that was another
That's a
one.
new application. Thank you for that, Rick.
Well, both of them. I don't know.
With that conversation primer, if you don't mind, I think I'll just launch right into the first. And if you don't mind, I guess I'll go off this chart if everybody's looked at the chart. Yeah, the chart's easier, and we won't miss one. The first one is the Arapahoe County Metro Mayor's Youth Awards. Last year's funding was at $200. Their request is $300. And if you don't mind, Council, I'm just going to kick you off with what I suggested, which was $200. Others like to weigh in. Mayor Pro Tem Gillett, if you don't mind, for this portion, I don't mind folks just kind of jumping into the conversation at this time.
I'm fine with 200. I could go to 300. This is the kind of thing I'd like to see happen, but I want at least 200.
I will say I attended their award ceremony last year. It was really heartwarming. We are disproportionate beneficiaries
Mayor,
of this.
excuse me just for a minute. So I know it's hard to have to sit here with us doing this. How can we engage you in this in a more positive way? Is there any way, or?
Don't give the money away.
Okay, well, we're not going to do that, so
Okay.
can we ask for you not to be kind of distracting over here and giggling?
We're not.
And, yeah, you were, but it's okay. I just want you to know. I just want you to be involved in this, and if you don't want to be, that's fine. I just want to know.
You don't have to. You're good. Thank you.
Let's move on, if you don't mind. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. I'm glad you do.
Awesome.
Again, I was just saying that, I attended theirs, and again, we had disproportionate representation. This is a wonderful thing for our local school kids. I wish I could give them more, but, 200, and really looking at the other contributing entities as well, I think 200 is the appropriate amount. We got support for 200 also from Councilmember Olson, was that correct?
I would do the same. Can I just make a suggestion?
Yep.
I have no problem with us doing the same thing we did in 2016. Almost everything on here, I'd say do the same we did last time.
I had that for the first three. Okay, that's helpful though. That and can reach us to consensus a little bit sooner. One problem with this process too is, Councilmember Russell, will you be participating in this discussion?
Probably not, because
Okay.
it's very troubling to me. For several reasons. We are in trouble. We're going to drop off the cliff, the budget cliff in 2019, and we're not doing anything to cut back on that.
I guess I'm just pointing out that if the four of us have any differences in opinion on the funding level, it's going to be difficult to reach consensus. I guess, I would say that, if we're split, as long as three of the four participating in this conversation, it's difficult to gain a consensus with just three members.
I think we will.
But we
Let's
will,
just keep
we
going.
will move it forward, and obviously it will be formally adopted and move forward. So with that, does anybody else have a different amount than $200 for the Arapahoe Metro Mayor's Community Youth Awards? I'm going to move on then to Arapahoe Philharmonic. Last year we were at 100. They requested 5. I'm at 100. Basic benefit, I think, here is, they do a good job, I think, of interacting with our school kids and bringing them over to these performances. I do think it's nice for our kids to have that classical experience. And this $100 doesn't
I'm
even
at
fund
100.
that
It
in
doesn't
my
do
mind.
much, but it's I
It's a
just
token.
I left them at the same.
In my mind, it's a bit of a token. I often wonder about $100 funding. I think we talked about this last year on whether
think
it's
we
worth
cut
the
it.
administration and their effort to fill out the application, and at what point does that not even really make sense? But in my mind, I think 100 is still beneficial. Anybody else support a different number besides 100? Going to move on to Arapahoe Santa Claus Shop. They requested 500. Last year we funded them at 200.
I put 0.
I had them at 200.
I could go with 0.
I think
Sounds like 0 has it. The Grinches on the council. No, I'm just teasing.
Grinch this year.
They'll give out lumps of coal. No, I'm just teasing. I'm sure we can work with them. You know, I think that the message, I think, to anybody who's not funded, I think we need to be a little bit careful about how we handle this and maybe reach out to them and say, hey, you know, I think this is a wonderful program, and I would suspect that everybody on council thinks this is a wonderful program, and not, you know, our action of not funding it, I think, is not necessarily saying that, you know, we don't think this is a worthwhile activity for our community. It's just maybe not an appropriate use of tax dollars. Is that kind of where we're at? And so I guess I would suggest maybe to staff that, you know, folks who were funded in the past who may not get funded maybe should get a special phone call or letter or something that expresses our support for their program despite our lack of funding. The other thing they requested is permanent space. They need a ton of space, though, right, Eric? I will say in our packet, the requests for in-kind requests were kind of muddled, and so some of the language there was difficult to read. And so sometimes, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you some questions regarding the in-kind. They need a lot of space that we don't have, correct?
That is correct.
I heard a big number of square footage.
Heated space and things like that, and we don't have that kind of space.
Okay. Let's move on to Ascend Performing Arts. This is a new applicant, requested $1,000. Trying to remind myself who they are.
Zero.
You know, I'm pretty much thinking we'll stick, you know, if we're going to be giving, okay, let's phrase this a little better. Maybe we should not look at taking on new people this round.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I'm probably at 0 on this one as well. Although I'm trying to look at their application, so if you give me a moment, that might be helpful. Do you know where it is? Anybody in the list? That's the problem with the...
I read this too long ago.
It seemed like they needed, and they also had an in-kind request for lighting and signage. Any color on that, Eric?
And again, we're not in the lighting and lighting business, so we'd have difficulty helping them with that.
Sorry, does anybody see this? What page this application's on? I can't do a Control F for it. I'm kind of surprised.
Your images, that's why.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go through it by application.
Yeah, maybe
Do
we
have
should.
time on this?
Yeah, if you don't mind, let's start back from the beginning of these applications.
Well, somebody else going to keep track of it then.
So the first application was the Youth Awards, which we already did. So we'll move on to the next one, which is the Inglewood Veterans Memorial Day celebration. Let's see. They requested their entire amount, which was $7,300. We haven't funded them in the past. I would like to fund them, I'm not going to lie. I went to this event, and
Which one are you looking at right now?
we're talking about the
Memorial Day
celebration at Fisher Auditorium. This one over at the high school. I will say that I attended this last year, and this was one of the best events I've ever been to in the city of Inglewood, and it is really works well with the local school district and highlighting local vets who, you know, paid the ultimate sacrifice, and I think it's a great thing for our community, especially our school district, to engage in. I had them at $500.
I'd be fine with that. The way I approached some of this was to figure out, okay, who are really helping our needy and some basic living kinds of things? And then secondly, who else generates community in a way that we're not able to through the kinds of things that we do? And then third was some sort of like category, for instance, like the Historic Preservation Society, and this one fit into that as sort of a cultural piece that is outside of it. I would have maybe done the veterans thing a little bit less, but I'm fine if we have enough money to do that.
Yeah, I liked your breakdown there of, you know, description of those different categories. I appreciate that. I think that's helpful for the council to think about it, because, you know, I was thinking about it as, you know, purely social services stuff, but this isn't that, and I do think this is important, and I think that kind of fits into those two categories you mentioned, of community as well as cultural kind of things. Okay, I'm going to pencil them for 500. Let's move on to the next one. TLC Meals on Wheels, funded them at $3,000 last year. They requested $3,500. I did deliver some meals in Inglewood this year. They do a lot of really good work here.
They
I will
really are
say.
meeting basic needs. I wouldn't mind going up to 3,500 since we've cut some others. Yeah.
It's a good one.
I had them at 3,000. Where'd you have them?
35.
35. I'm going to pencil them in for 35.
That's one where our community gets, this is where, these are taxpayers in our community getting help back.
No question. And they also will subsidize the cost of the meals for those that cannot afford the meals. I delivered to a lot of folks who were not able to contribute very much to the meals at all. They were still very willing to accept applications from the city of Inglewood and deliver directly to their door several hot meals. It's really heartwarming.
And the longer we can keep these folks living in their homes, the burden to government or to the taxpayers stays down.
Great point. I think that's where we probably get a lot of ROI on this. All right, I'm penciling them at 35. Let's move on to the next application, which is Pads for Progress, Inc. This is a new applicant who is requesting $9,000.
There wasn't very much on theirs. I was very, this is actually a big issue in homelessness. It really is. But the application just seemed really odd. I don't know anything about them, and then 9,000 people will be served. How do they know that even? I mean, maybe it doesn't allow them to describe very much more here, but.
Seems like a new organization to me.
Yeah, I would wonder, I mean,
I had the similar concerns about, hey, the structure of the organization and their mission and defining some of those things. I agree that it is a relatively large, homeless issue, and we do have issues. I had them at $100 of a token contribution.
I'm fine with that, and I would like to know who they're. I think this one, I actually tried to look them up online and couldn't find them. Did anybody else try and Google them?
Wouldn't shock me if they
It's an
didn't
incorporated,
have a website.
so yeah.
When they describe
Actually, I thought there was another organization just like it, but I don't think it was it. But anyway, I would love to see their 501c3. It's just not a known. And the two on my right, this is one reason why this becomes really difficult, because we don't have some background information on some of these, and we do on others. Like everybody knows who Meals on Wheels is. And,
that's right.
And then you've got this. Yeah, no.
The relationship, the
I
address
keep
they
getting weird
gave was
stuff when
the address they gave was a P.O. box,
yeah, it's
too.
not. I would want more information. So to be honest, I'm not even sure I want to give them $100.
Yeah, you're at zero.
I didn't. I gave them zero to begin with because I didn't know who they were.
All right, I'm putting them down for zero. I think, these type of applicants who get, zero funding probably need a little feedback on their application about, hey, next year this is something the council might be willing to consider if there's some additional information and structure to the organization. Moving on, Doctors Care is the next applicant. We funded them in the past. We funded them at zero last year. Rick's at zero. Any others?
I was 0 too for the very reason that Rick suggested.
I'm at zero also.
Okay, I'm going to pencil them down for zero. I will note that Littleton contributes a substantial amount to them, in the teens of thousands, I think, and it's
Really?
kind of interesting to me. I'm kind of curious,
sent them an application.
how they see that value proposition for their relationship with Doctors Care. So it might be something interesting to kind of pick their brain on for next time. I just noticed that. I'm pretty sure that's accurate. I might trying to look at it now. Yeah, you said you didn't see it on there? I could be confused. Oh, no, City of Littleton, 15,000. They're in the C's, not the L. And so I'm just kind of curious how they see that. But let's move on then to the next. Which is Mosaic Church Kid Fest. Not to be confused with the Mosaic Church application for the other two applications they have. This one is just the Halloween event.
Zero.
I was at 0 too.
Putting them down for 0. Does sound like a popular event. Hopefully we can work with them on finding a new home for their event. They suggested they might want to do something at the park or somewhere else. Eric, do you recall?
Yeah, they're looking for a new venue. We can maybe encourage them to kind of partner up with the city's Parks and Recreation Department, which just had their Halloween carnival at the Recreation Center this past weekend.
I think that's a good idea. I think this is a great partner for us to think about, sustainability of events as well, for family, kid-oriented type events. Moving on to the next. It is Gateway. Here it is. Jeez, I must have missed it. Gateway Domestic Violence Services. They asked for $5,000. We funded them at $1,000 last year. I need to review their application because I thought I missed it.
Oh.
This is the battered women's shelter, I believe.
I had this down as something else.
It is page 32 of the hard copy, and I can give you an electronic. Well, it won't tell me what page it is. It's 32 of 171 in that bottom right corner.
They're asking for in-kind as well, right?
Yes, printing, office supplies, etc. Any color on that?
Yeah.
Okay. I just see that kind of handwritten in there, so I can read that portion. There was some sentence that I can't read there, but
Is this the one that's over off of Floyd?
No, that's the,
This is the one out in Aurora?
is it in Aurora? I don't know.
We don't want to
No,
talk about
it's-
the location count.
We don't actually
Point of
talk.
order.
I think I know where it is, but we're not supposed to talk about
Is it within the boundaries of?
It takes it takes women from Englewood. Women from Englewood end up there,
Okay.
or it can be there for support.
yeah, it seems like they serve most of Arapahoe County.
I support at least 1,000 on this. This is one of those social needs that I think is really hard to meet.
There's probably some crossover with the work from Family Tree, House of Hope. Those are the two that,
That's what you're
No.
thinking of.
yeah, maybe.
No, Steve was
Oh,
the one
okay.
in Floyd.
Location, yeah.
Well, I don't have any problems with doing 1,000.
Yeah, that's what I had it penciled in as 1,000 as well. And we don't have extra printing or office supplies, I'm guessing.
No, I think that would be really difficult to try and organize.
Okay, let's move on to the next. Special Olympics, Colorado. They are asking for $800. We funded them last year at $800, as well as allowed rec center and pool use.
I'd like to see us continue.
I would be in favor of continuing. Plus, it brings a lot of people into our community that will use restaurants and so on during these events.
I had them at 500, but I'm fine with 800. I do see a lot of benefit to this program and certainly want to allow access for any city facilities that they could benefit from.
It's a big deal to these kids that.
No doubt.
It's really fun if you can go to some of their events. They're really very, very inspiring.
I'm good at 8.
Okay. Let's move on to Cornerstone Food Bank. They requested 1,000. They were funded at 700 last year. I had them at 7.
On the chart, it says not applicable for last year. Oh no, that's Compassion.
Yeah,
sorry.
Compassion, because they're a new app.
Yeah. Sorry.
Anybody else? I had them at 7.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Okay.
Yep.
on to the next. Oh, of course, I lost my spot.
Which then makes me want to do the other one at 700 too, and just keep it the same for both food banks. If you want to make that easy.
Who's the other food bank? That is Holy Cow. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good with that. That's what I had him at as well. Any comments on Holy Cow Food Bank?
No comment.
Okay. I think it is Birthday Smiles. Does that sound right? I think Birthday Smiles is next. This is a new applicant requesting 3,600.
No.
I had a token 100.
0.
I had 0.
Okay. Let's move on to Inglewood Unleashed. This is a new applicant, even though we have a relationship with these folks, obviously. They're requesting $12,000 to fund a public improvement in our park for a dog fountain. So it's kind of a unique request in that they want it to go to a public improvement here. Thoughts or discussion on this
So my
item?
question for this is, I thought this was already in the plans.
Yeah, it is. It's in our plan. I think we actually challenged them to raise funds, so for them to come back and ask for funds.
And ask us for it?
Touche.
Okay.
This is their challenge.
Okay, my answer is no.
No.
Okay. Let's move on. Giving Heart Inglewood. Real quick on Inglewood Unleashed, I do think we need to, they do great work in our parks and cleanups and things. We need to ensure that we have a strong partnership with them. So hopefully by turning them down.
We really are supporting it, though.
That's
The
right.
parks, we voted on it as Parks and
Yeah,
Rec.
the Parks and Recreation Division is supportive of the project. As a matter of fact, we've made several more improvements at the canine corral this past year, and look forward to working on more again this year.
Yeah, fantastic. And if we can find some other ways to help them, fundraise to fund that public improvement, that would be a win-win-win. So that's fantastic.
They are resourceful and persistent. Many dog owners are like I am.
That's right. You don't get any money unless you ask for it. So that's awesome. Giving Heart Inglewood, I have as next. They are a new applicant, asking for 1,000.
I had 0. This is another
This is a
one.
homeless day center, right? I believe that's right.
This is another one where I'd want to know the whole background of this. So maybe in the future, if they're newer, maybe we need a piece in here that says, are you a new organization to the city? Provide us some of your background and who's on your board, how do you constitute yourselves, that kind of thing.
Because some of these are kind of cool grassroots kind of efforts, but they're difficult to, verify or, make sure that they're kind of doing what they say they're going to do. I did want to fund a token fund here. I think I had 100 on this one. Others want to weigh in on Giving Heart?
0.
Thank you.
It sounds so bad.
Oh, they all do such good work. It's so difficult. This is a difficult conversation. They had an in-kind request as well for supplies, I believe.
It looks like they want us to do a drive of some sort.
Yeah, I doubt we have any of that stuff on hand.
We don't. If I wish we did, then we would be giving them to an organization like that.
Move on to Tri-City Academy Charter School. This is a new applicant asking for 5,000.
I mean, this was the same as the other school, 0.
Yeah, that's probably where I'm at too. I do think we need to think about partnering with our school district. Hopefully our first date went well enough where after the election we can have a second date and discuss about some more general marketing for the entire school district as a whole, including all the options that are available to residents.
Abstain.
Fair enough, thank you. Steve?
0.
Thank you. Let's move on to... Oh, they did ask for advertising in kind, and that's what I'm kind of talking about. I think in some discussions with the school district, I think we need to talk about how we're communicating and marketing ourselves to the public, and how we might be able to partner in that in some of those endeavors.
That would be okay, especially with us going to a quarterly magazine. I would be fine with that.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm hopeful, Mayor Pro Tem, I don't know how you feel about that as far as, getting a joint meeting with the school district after the election.
I mean, will the charter be there then too?
I'm sorry?
Would the charter show up with that too?
Not, well, I'd rather not speak for them.
Yeah.
My understanding, council, as a point of clarification, is that this particular school is separate from the Inglewood School District. They're part of Charter School, Inc., CSI, and so as such, they're a little bit separate from the Inglewood School District number 1. So consider that as you consider your deliberation on the advertising piece.
What might be interesting is on our website to have the list of all the schools that are in the city of Englewood as opportunities for any families in any school, religious or, well, there aren't, unfortunately, one of them is closing, but just as where to go to school in Englewood, here are the different schools that are certified to be teaching.
Doesn't the school, Tri-Cities, receive funding from the same mechanism as the public school, Inglewood Public Schools?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right. Now, Mr. Keck, you said taking consideration that they are a separate entity. Now, were you thinking if we do advertising for them, we'll do advertising for the other schools? And I would be fine with that because that plays into our community image. We have some choices for schools, so that'd be very appropriate.
Yeah, I think, as we highlight our own quality of life, value propositions, education certainly has to be a big part of that. And with or without them, I certainly think we'll be talking about that. And I like Councilmember Olson's suggestion about, just educational resources generally, and that way we can highlight all of the local schools. So again, I think we can talk about a joint meeting with the school district here at some point in the future. And perhaps with charters if need be. Okay, let's move on to the next, which is Mosaic Church Food Bank Holy Cow. We already talked about that one, so I'm going to move on to Mosaic Church Compassion. That's a new application for $1,000. This is for gas vouchers and bus passes.
0.
Yeah, I had it at 0.
Oh, I did too.
Okay. Really impressed by Mosaic's activity, though, in our community and willingness to try different things that they see needs on. I really appreciate that. Hopefully we can support that without funding it.
What page are we on now? I keep going.
I'm at 58 of 171, and it's Arapahoe Philharmonic. That is a $500 request. They were funded at $100 last year. We already talked about Arapahoe Philharmonic. We got them at $100. Does that still stand? Going to move on then to Brothers Redevelopment. We funded them last year at $1,000. They requested $2,500.
This is one of those I'd be willing to go up on.
Yeah, we ran out of, some of our residents needed more help. I would have loved to help more.
It seems like sorry, go ahead.
I would love to.
It seemed like their efforts were really focused on painting. It sounds like they got 10 houses painted last year at no cost in Inglewood to the client. Really fantastic. I suppose these are all property or home owners.
The one we did last year, I helped paint, and it was, homeowner. They'd been there a while, and it was a huge need for them.
I would be all right with going to 2,000 on that. That money comes back to our community, and it helps keep people in their homes, helps them keep their homes in livable condition.
I'd like to also ask them if when they're going to do these, if they would get in touch maybe with Dorothy in the library for the civic engagement piece and the website that we have to get a little bit more involvement from our citizens, because I think it was a great opportunity last year.
One question. This would be for Eric Keck. We did this be a tool. You know, would that money, instead of going to Brothers, would it be better used maybe going towards these continual projects where we're being a tool and we're getting all the volunteers, so it help pay for materials? We can make this spread out a little bit more.
It's not a bad idea as well. I think that this desire of the staff to expand the National Day of Services next year, as well as look for more opportunities throughout the year, not just the one day. We didn't have them submit any requests for funding for this year, but that's another alternative. I think Brothers is quite active in Inglewood, but so is the Day of Service. I mean, we accomplished quite a bit with this a little bit of time.
So let me ask you a question about that. So when you say your staff, is that Tony or others or Dorothy included?
No, actually, it's a separate organization.
No, I mean when you said our staff want to continue and expand.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, myself, Tony, Dorothy.
Okay. I'm really in favor of that, but I think it would be unfortunate if we gave money and we hadn't had an application.
Sure.
But next year, I think it'd be good to just, maybe we pick 2 or 3 of these that we know we're going to do our service days with and start to fund them so that we've got it for when we get volunteers to do things.
Yeah, great. I think Brothers does great work. I did have them at slightly less funding than 2000, just given the idea that it is funding homeowners who have some asset who, obviously these other organizations are geared a little bit more towards people who have nothing. That being said, I think we have consensus around 2000. What a great accounting they provided to us, though, Brothers did in their application, even a certified letter from their accountant or, a third party. So that was pretty impressive. Still scrolling through all the material they provided. That was awesome. I think the next one is House of Hope, if I'm not mistaken. Family Tree and House of Hope. Yes. They requested $10,000. We funded them at $2,500 last year. I will say I think this is one of the greatest organizations we have here locally. I would even be open to increasing the funding on this organization.
I would too. They really do an excellent work. Unfortunately, we have people who need them.
Yeah. I attended some of their award ceremonies recently. Not a dry eye in the house. It really is touching what they do for battered women and families here locally.
I'm good with going up.
You guys want to go up to 3,000? You want to go higher? No, hey, embolden me here. I'm open because I do really support their mission.
What was it last year?
2,500.
I don't want to go back to my thing again. 2,500. And so you're talking about 3?
Yeah, I was talking about 3.
Come on, let's go 3,500 then.
35? I could get
Well,
to 35.
let's see where we are with the money too. I think we've got more.
Yeah, so far we're behind pace certainly, and
Yeah, let's go up to 3,500.
I'm good with 35. I'm going to pencil it in for 35.
They provide a valuable service to our community.
Okay.
So if my math's correct, you're at $13,000 pledged right now.
Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, what did you just say? We're
Just at this point in time.
Thank you.
Where were we last year for a total?
That's a good question. I didn't have a total here.
I think you were at 18.5 last year. I believe you reserved $1,500 for council discretion.
I believe the next one in the order is Inglewood Schools. We already talked about that, though, right?
Yep, 0.
So we're moving on. I think it's great they learn about the health of the South Platte River. I just think if we get into subsidizing educational programs, then it's a little bit of a slippery slope. Inglewood Historic Preservation Society is the next. They requested 1,000. We funded them at $250 last year.
Go to 500.
I could too.
As could I.
What other things are we doing for them right now? Are we providing them any space whatsoever?
Yeah, some in kind for meetings. We ought to put a value on that just so that we remind citizens know we are. I think that's a great thing to be doing for them.
I would be fine with 500.
Great. They've done a really good job with their programs that are open to the public, free to the public. And as we've talked about so many times as a group, I think this historic nature of our community is really an awesome differentiator for us and a real community builder and something we need to highlight more moving forward.
I do have a question about theirs because, so they had a deficit last year? Which I didn't quite understand their little page.
No, I showed them as a profitable, I'm looking at their P&L on page 128 of 71, and it shows a net income
120.
after expenses, 128 of 71. Their profit and loss statement.
Isn't that interesting? I'm on 120. Mine comes up as 126. So.
Oh, sorry, on the electronic it is. I apologize. I'm looking at this preview version. It won't tell me what page it is. I'm quoting the bottom right-hand corner.
So total
hard copy.
expenses were 2219, right? And then net ordinary was 1663. And then net income.
Oh, you're right. It might be a negative number.
Yeah, so I didn't
It's not
know
in
how
brackets,
they
but
were, I didn't know
fair
how
enough.
they were actually reporting this. It didn't make sense at the end. So I was a little concerned. Maybe we could provide them some.
Yeah, I think that should have been a bracketed net loss then.
But how are they taking care of that then?
128 on the hard copy, and I believe it's
And it's
126
126 on
on the
electronic.
electronic. That's the profit and loss statement from Inglewood Historic Preservation Society. Going back to their balance sheet, perhaps I can take a look and see if they've got some assets.
They must.
Yeah, I mean, they've got cash in the bank.
Oh, the page
they've got
before
10,000
it.
in cash.
The page before it shows you. I'm sorry. Yep, I think that would be great to increase them by that amount. That'll help. I'm sorry, I don't know why I didn't see the page before it. I just stuck to the.
No problem. There's a lot of information in there. You missed an entire
Yeah, should've been
application,
a
apparently.
bracket.
So I've got them down at 500. Let's move on. To Integrated Family Community Services, formerly Interfaith, who we funded obviously for a long time. They requested 10,000. We funded them at 5,000. I had them down for another 5. This is probably our broadest service provider when we look at the scope of services to our community, and probably the most volume-wise as well, as far as services provided to our community.
I've only interacted with them a couple times, and personally once myself and our family got vandalized in a very bizarre way at our house, and they helped with it. They were out at our house, just out of the blue, because that's who the police put us with, and we had just moved into Englewood. That was quite a while ago.
Their mission is very flexible. I'm fairly convinced that if you called them with a community problem, they would try to figure out a solution.
Yeah, they did. They were pretty creative.
You guys want to weigh in? Others?
I was hoping they'd be like at 3. I know they do good, but we're also.
They get a good chunk of change from us.
Yeah, it's a big chunk. And we have increased in other categories, and I'd like to see us not spend more than we did last year. Maybe the cost of living increase, so it would be relatively flat in what we spend.
They've changed their name, by the way. I don't know if you all noticed that.
Yeah. When I first saw it, I was like, who is this Integrated? I will say for Interfaith, we've funded them at much higher levels in the past. Not that that's a huge determining factor in our decision making, but in the past we've given them, I want to say when we began, we were giving them close to 20,000 alone.
Yeah. Their name reflects better of who they are right now. They're doing family self-sufficiency work. I'm fine with.
So I've heard 3. I've heard 5. Others want to weigh in?
Where are we with our amount now? We've got how much?
$13,500.
Oh, still, we gave zeros.
We're at 13.5, and we have, I think that's it. I think this is the last one. Is this the last one?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this is the last one. So if we did 5, it'd get us to, what do you got?
18.5, and then you'd have 1,500 for council discretion.
We'd be exactly where we were at last year. That's funny. Down to the penny.
Well, how about we split the difference and we go with 4 on them then?
Sounds like that idea has consensus.
Sorry, was that 4,000?
4,000.
Now you have $2,500 council discretion.
Great. Further comments or discussion regarding aid to other agencies? Finally, again, I think we, as we move down funding on some of these, we just need to be a little bit sensitive to that and try to, again, reach out and make sure that they're aware that we support their mission, and perhaps there's other ways that we can support these folks for the folks that we're not funding, because all of them are doing good work in our community, that's for sure.
But there was a page on rentals, wasn't there?
On what?
On how much it costs to rent space here at... Yeah, I'm sorry, I missed that. It was the last part, that's why I missed it.
Oh, the application. Yeah, there was an application for the permit to use the
Well,
facility.
and so I think there was great, in the memo, there was what was the comment about, we don't usually waive that unless it's part of what we've agreed on, right? Is that correct? Manager Keck? Unless we say it, we don't do it necessarily, right? Okay.
Well, in saying that, though, let's make sure that we've
So-
responded to all the in-kind.
Yeah, we might have to do that and to make sure that, especially with the Historic Preservation Society, that we note that.
Yeah. Let me try to do a wrap-up of that. So Tri-City asked for advertising. We denied that. But we're going to talk about that advertising of education in the future. Special Olympics, we granted their, recreation and pool use. Holy Cow was asking for maintenance services. I believe we denied that. Giving Heart was asking for miscellaneous supplies. I believe we denied that. Gateway was asking for printing and office supplies. We denied that. Inglewood Schools was asking for demo equipment. Can you add a little color on that one? I don't know that I flushed that one out totally. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I read that too. I think what they wanted was, to be able to use some AV equipment. So I don't think we don't have anything we can lend to them on that end.
Okay, so it sounds like we denied that. Inglewood Historic Preservation was offering for printing office storage. I believe we denied that. Doctor's Care was asking for medical equipment. I don't think we have any of that. Quarterstone is asking for donations and food supplies. I believe we denied that. Brothers Redevelopment asking for advertising and building supplies. I believe we denied that. Although the advertising piece, I suppose it depends on how you describe that. We did hear from council that we want to partner with them more, and
We can use the Cities of Service site and our website for that, and
Excellent.
we can help with that. And just as a point of clarification, Mayor, we do have office space and storage space for the Inglewood Historic Preservation Society, so that's already been taken care of prior to this.
great.
So before you say no, we've done that.
Okay, thank you. So that piece, the office storage, space and storage.
Correct.
But we also have been giving free room usage, right? So we should probably quantify that and make sure that, so
Correct.
that if we all move and change, that they get what they are expecting, if we're expecting that.
Sure.
Yeah, basically a continuation of the in-kind services provided in the past and adding the storage and office space. Okay. Let's see. Ascend Performing Arts asked for lighting and signage. We denied that. Arapahoe Santa Claus asked for permanent space. We denied that. Philharmonic asked for miscellaneous supplies. So I think that's responding to all the in-kind requests. So I think we're fairly clear where we're at on that. Any other clarifying or other comments or questions regarding aid to other agencies? How are we doing on bio? We want to take a break? Or you want to get into the comp plan before we do that?
Let's take a break.
Okay, we're going to take 5, and we'll pick back up in 5.
Everybody have the score?
No scores.
playing, so.
Don't give me any.
I don't know.
Okay, nobody's gonna give me any.
I don't follow sports at all anyway, so.
No, that's what I should have done on my lunch. Put them down and then I could have done leaving. Got aggravated. Same game today.
The first quarter, I thought we were going to get killed. Doing your job. Yeah. You guys are watching.
Has that door on, but got that door on, but it apparently sticks on the top too, and now and it's worse now because it got painted. Trim got painted 2 coats, and it got painted. And now it's when it gets 45 degrees, it really rubs. Take it off and plane the top. Other than that, it worked. Loosened those things up, and then it just came right together easy.
No more. So this is a reason we should have more than our fair share. And the Inglewood Housing Authority is not period.
I think we should separate them up.
Hold on.
Ask for all of our assets back.
Are we recording? Yes, we do.
Are you ready to release it?
No, we're not.
Why?
Because of us, because of the owner. They're doing the final tweaks. And the owner does not want to be contacted.
When will that be?
We were hoping, supposed to be by the end of the month. I know.
Because I heard that.
We have an agreement, but they're adjusting. One of the adjustments is.
Forgot about that.
Was it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't be Trump.
Could be Bernie.
That too. Gosh, I forgot that this was here. And that
I know.
I would hit it all the time when I would come in here. Just once my ear. I wanted to sit over here. I thought I understood you. I totally thought that's what you said. So they're rude. They're just rude.
Try to leave a little civilian so that for all of us at the beginning of meetings rather than
From
tip with you over nothing.
I really heard you wrong. I was listening, but I think the way you said it made it sound like that you thought maybe this was coming. Like, I don't know where they came up with this.
Just thinking that I didn't know everything in the situation.
Yeah.
Why we're having study sessions.
Well, you should go back and watch yourself on it and see how you came.
I think it's fair.
Because I was like,
assessment.
oh, okay,
Again,
I didn't know this. Did we? We should have known this if we were. I bet the house really doesn't. Well, Rick, were you at the last?
But they would be a party too.
Were you at the last
So the board
housing
has to approve it.
association?
They called it exec session at the beginning of the
They do do.
might be done by 5:30. I said, well, I'm not coming.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they made. When was that? Well, that wouldn't. That wouldn't be the same then. I've had them do. They have to do that under certain circumstances when they talk about confidential people. Yeah. Yeah, that's always how it's been for me. I wonder if it's because somebody had to leave. But you should, I would call Dorothy, or what's her name, tomorrow and find out what the heck is this. I don't either. They're independent. We don't own them. They're not our board. We get we get to put people on it, but we have problems. We can call the regional guy. I know him. It's Rick Garcia. You know Rick? He's on Denver City Council. I really clunked my knee. God. It's so cold over here, I can use my hands as ice on my knee that I just clunked.
Are you okay?
I forgot that right there.
Oh.
Over where Amy is right in the middle where you sit. And I
you hit it
just,
pretty good there.
I
That's
did.
amazing.
I'm like, I need
The
some
money.
ice.
Joe,
Okay, if I could get folks to take their seats, we're going to get back in order in just a second.
at some point, could you add to that request? Because if they put that use tax into the budget, we're going to have to take it out.
Okay, guys, I'd like to call.
She's got something.
I'd like to call this meeting back to order, and before we move on to agenda item 4, Councilmember Russell.
I just have a question for staff. Was there a reason that this invoice from Cahoots was in the package?
It was requested, I think.
Yeah, there was a request for how much money the city spent on Cahoots.
Well, that was after.
That was after this. This was actually in the packet, and when I gave the request yesterday,
It was at the back of the 8 other agencies.
yeah, 8 other agencies. And actually, the community room diagram and stuff is in here too.
Well, the Cahoots
Okay.
spelling has something to do with Hampton Hall, so I thought maybe it had something to do with it.
Thank you.
I give them both to you.
All right, so it wasn't
Figure it
supposed to
out.
be there. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I don't think that was in my packet. That's interesting. I don't know if that got corrected or something. I didn't see that in mine, but interesting. Thanks for pointing that out. Let's move on to agenda item 4, which is the comprehensive plan, historic preservation piece of our conversation. Community development staff is present to discuss recommendations on the inclusion of historic preservation objectives in the comprehensive plan. The memorandum provided by staff provides some language and locations for discussion of historic preservation. Any further comments from staff?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor and Council. What we've put together is a series of goals, objectives, I should say, for historic preservation to be included in the plan. And we have them in the live goal, the work goal, the shop goal, and the learn goal. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about those as we move forward.
Councilmember Yates?
My button was covered up over here.
I saw you reaching.
Okay. On 4.8, and a lot of them, they say encourage. The word encourage, it talks about creating a fund, incentives, programs, and so on. What is, what could that look like, from the funding aspect? I'm in favor of giving the spirit of encouraging these things, but I'm not necessarily sold that we need to be putting extra money towards encouraging people to keep their architecture in one way or another. That should be handled through some other mechanism.
That was a series of objectives that we took from the information that the Historic Preservation Society had presented to council. There was the term was incentivized, and typically in a situation like that, there might be some funding that the city, through a Historic Preservation Commission, might provide for significant preservation projects. And if that's causing some heartburn, we can rewrite that. Funding isn't an absolute necessity in that, but in terms of incentives, there may not be very many other incentives. One option might be to reduce or eliminate certain city fees associated with a particular historic preservation project. So give on one hand or take away on the other hand, I suppose.
Potentially that could be a possible solution.
The historic, if there is in fact a Historic Preservation Commission created, they might be able to attract some sorts of fundings, or perhaps, even though it's a city agency, that's kind of tough, but if the Historic Preservation Society is still in existence as well, I believe they're a 501c3, so they should have the ability to attract grant funds that they might be able to use in conjunction with other programs that the city would have for incentivizing preservation of whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial structures or other historic elements in the community.
Yeah, I see where a real cost is going to be on this is setting up the infrastructure for this board or commission, whatever we end up doing on this eventually, in helping to put materials together for residents that are coming forward and they want to make improvements on their homes, to give them ideas on how to keep that historical look, instead of, rip the whole roof off and go with something totally modern.
There are a number of resources available for that from the federal government through the state government and other local agencies in the metro area. So providing information and guidance for that would not be a difficult task. If the Historic Preservation Commission were created, I think that would be one of their primary responsibilities. Would be, in addition to putting a plan together to identify historic and culturally significant elements in the community, to provide also the background information and how-to information for anybody interested in maintaining the historic character of their home or their business.
Thank you.
Do others want to comment on 4.8? I've got a couple of those who've requested to speak. Are those on 4.8?
Yeah.
Okay. Councilmember Rolson?
I guess it's on 8. It's the 8 of all of them. So each one of them has the exact same 6, 7, and 8. The statements are the same, but the actual significant area is what's changed, right? And so on 8 was the one that that to me is almost the kicker for whether or not people will be able to preserve and restore, and yet it's the most contentious probably out of all of these. But to me, something like this needs to be in there to develop some kind of carrot for historical preservation rather than the stick, which is I think what some neighborhoods in particular, Arapahoe Acres, really, some don't want to have people tell them what to do, but could there be a way to encourage people to do what preserves that neighborhood? And that's where the incentive piece can come in. Maybe another way to write that on all three then would be to develop or to collaborate and develop incentive programs, because the collaboration can be at the state level. There may be some county area kinds of things that could come up. I don't know. I mean, there are cities like Denver and others that have really done some very strong preservation and restoration, have come up with funds themselves, but we're probably not going to be able to do that. Or maybe not right now, so I don't know. But I do think this is the kicker for the 4, 6, and 7 on each of them, because if there's not some kind of financial incentive, I don't think people will do it.
Personally, I read 4.8 and those others to mean outside funding.
Yeah, I did
It's
too.
kind of interesting to hear that kind of comment from staff and from Councilmember Yates. So, I would be supportive of adding something that said outside funding or, look for funding. I don't know. I probably
Someone else's money.
there
Well,
you go.
but if it's, sorry, I'm just talking.
No, go ahead. Did you have something else?
No, I agree, but I think maybe we don't limit to any where it comes from, but develop incentive programs that could include funding from sources available for historic preservation, or I don't know. Or maybe when you have a developer come in, there could be some incentivizing for them to stay within the aesthetics of some area that we'd want them to. Let's say, God forbid, that the post office gets closed down, and we want to make sure that that building actually stays in some kind of form. Let's say a restaurant went in there. Don't worry, I don't have any special knowledge on this, but we would want to do something, I think a lot of people would want to do something to preserve that building. What would we do to incentivize a developer to keep it the way it is? We might be the only ones who have the ability to do that. Would it be some kind of, I don't know, but...
I think maybe the first step would be understanding what types of resources are out there for us, and then we can kind of develop some plans from there. But I think we're kind of in step one of not knowing what sort of that landscape sort of looks like. And so I would be in favor of language that kind of describes that process of looking for outside or trying to partner or those type of things, rather than just saying fund, because it sounds like it's coming from us. Councilmember Barentine or Russell, anything on 4.8 or any of those?
Actually,
Goal live for.
I am in support of keeping it as general as it is right now, and not making it real specific. The question that I have, and actually before I go on to this other question, as far as the post office is concerned, I believe it's way beyond our control. Because my husband worked for the post office, and the Inglewood post office cannot be changed. They cannot take the mural off the wall. As a matter of fact, the post office was going to sell the building.
I know, I was on council when it happened, so I know. But it is, you can take it off. You can take it off, but they have to put it somewhere else. It can't be destroyed.
Okay, but that's pretty expensive. But anyway, my question was, in the original comp plan, I believe, at least the one dated December 9th, 2015, under Live 112, it says, Inglewood will provide a balance of diverse, high-quality housing stock that incorporates a range of housing forms and densities that appeal to families, singles, and seniors while retaining the historical character and form of established neighborhoods. Now, I mean, I think it's totally been eliminated. And I know that there's a lot of things in there that I would like removed, but is there something that we can put in this comp plan that we will retain the historical character and form of established neighborhoods? And I mean also on Broadway, there's historical buildings down there, and maintaining the historical character and the form, even in the new developments.
I guess a question for staff would be then, what mechanism would be put in place to accomplish that? As I understand it, the Historical Preservation Commission, as proposed by the Historical Preservation Society, was not supportive of what is known as hostile designations, where the city or an agency of the city would file for historic status on a building. If we don't have a set of standards to apply to what would be to identify, in effect, or define what the historic character of a neighborhood is, and then what buildings in that neighborhood or in that stretch of Broadway, meet that standard. Other buildings then could be modified any way that the building code would allow, perhaps. So we'd have to have a fairly robust set of standards to identify, one, which structures are historic and contribute to whatever the defined character of that area or neighborhood is, and then the ability to enforce those. Whether property owners would support that or not, I don't know, but it's a bit more complicated than just saying retain the historic character of a neighborhood without being able to define that.
Well, see, the frightening thing is that we don't have any definitions, and we just move on and tear down whole blocks and rebuild. I believe that Inglewood does have character and has had character during its entire history of things. Now, there's a house, I believe it is on Quincy and Fox. It is a huge house. It takes up the entire lot. And that does not fit in the character of that neighborhood. So I'm not sure that we need to have definitions. The definitions that are happening in Inglewood are changing the historical character of our neighborhoods. And so, I mean, most of this other stuff that we're putting in the comp plan is up to the determination of who is working on it at the time. I just think that we could put that back in.
Can you read it again?
The original thing said, Inglewood will provide a balance of diverse, high-quality housing stock that incorporates a range of housing forms and densities that appeal to families, singles, and seniors, while retaining the historical character and form of established neighborhoods. And what I would like to retain is the very last sentence, not necessarily that it appeals, because if we, retain the historical character, it would appeal to all age groups, not just one age group.
Councilmember Barrington?
I agree with Councilmember Russell that we need some definitions on whether we leave some of this as it is or whether we add some of hers. We're still going to need to define things, and your need to set standards and the way you enforce it is still going to need to be identified. If you go with 4.6 and you talk about the preservation and restoration of historically significant residential buildings, you have to, who's deciding what's historically significant? What are the criteria for that, and how are we going to enforce it? You have the same problem with that as you do with what she's suggesting, whether you use that verbiage or historically significant. The next one, you start bringing in ways to fund things. When you say encourage and support, you start talking about the ability of another agency that's outside of the city, that's a separate 501c3, that we cannot count on and should not be put into our comp plan, is being counted on to provide the funding for that. This comp plan, however, is the plan for the city, and if we're requiring that, then we should have a way, we should be designating how we're going to do that, and if we're going to do that through the Historic Preservation Society, then it should say that. Then it should say through the other agencies that we're partnering with, but as it sits, you're doing a city-alone document, and all of this verbiage, all of this conversation will be forgotten in 10 years when somebody looks at this, or 5 years, or a year, however long this lasts, and goes, this is what they wrote. We're supposed to do this. It doesn't say that you should support this, to incentivize this through the Historic Society grants or through some other federal funding. It's ours. It's our document. So I do think that whether you go with Councilmember Russell's verbiage on that, or you stick with your own, we need to have some definition of what these mean and what this is going to obligate somebody to, because you're right, you are stuck in the same problem, and that you need a set of standards and a way to enforce it.
I was suggesting that if the council is disposed to create a historic preservation commission, that would be their chief responsibilities to identify historic structures and culturally significant structures in the city, as well as develop a plan for their preservation, which could include partnering, as Mayor Jefferson said, partnering with other agencies, and specifically, since we have a local historic preservation society, that would be the logical choice. Now, whether there's money changing hands in that transaction or not is beside the point. There are many ways that funding can be made available for the preservation of historic and culturally significant elements in the community. A major source might be the City of Englewood, but there's also grants available. The Historic Preservation Society would have access to grants from a variety of sources that if they chose to make those available for incentivizing or helping developers or individual property owners improve their property in a historic fashion, that'd be terrific.
Then we need to, because we're going around in a circle, because we're still putting things that are not into this document that are just anecdotal on what we believe is. If we believe that the Historic Society, a board or commission, should be the one who designates what a significantly historic piece of property is, then this document should say that. Then it should say, as the historic, and then we should have the description for the board say that's one of their jobs. And I'm not sure that that's something that we've all come to an agreement on yet. But to leave it this vague and to just do anecdotal things that we could get money from here and we could have these people deciding this issue probably should be more defined in here.
This is a policy document, and I quite frankly don't think putting that type of specificity in the document that may in fact tie the hands of council. Since there has been very little talk about a historic preservation commission and what their role might be, I don't think it's appropriate at this point to put a lot of definition into the comp plan in that regard. That should be left to the purview of that commission if it were to be formed in conjunction with consultation with council.
And the concern from people reading this that gets brought forward is that it's so vague as to leave everything open, and then a heavy-handedness that could come depending on another council. And this council is in some way tying some hands by doing a comp plan. We tie future councils' hands when we do zoning. So if we're going to go ahead and do this comp plan, we have to do it so that we understand that we're creating a situation that people can rely on for their land use. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
This is a policy document that is able to be changed by council, by this council, by future councils to reflect conditions in the community. So simply because it's stated in the comp plan today, the way the program is set up in the comprehensive plan, we do annual reviews on key elements in the community, and then every 5 years we do a major evaluation of where we are in terms of development and progress with the comprehensive plan, and that presumably would mean that there would be changes to the document to reflect what we've accomplished and what we still have yet to accomplish.
And I appreciate that, and I've already voiced that I don't believe that this is a comp plan is necessarily the willow and the wind thing and should be changeable, because people have to be able to rely on this comp plan and land use in order to invest, to know what they're investing in and what they can do, and that the idea that a council could change it at any moment is actually kind of scary for some people to invest. So I disagree with that piece of that, just. And you know that. But I do think that if we're going to go ahead, and my recommendation would be that we would define those words better, just like you suggested for hers, regardless of whether it's this verbiage or hers, that we better define it.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates.
I am in favor of trying to preserve historical sites within our community. One concern that always comes up for me is property ownership. I believe in the Constitution. I believe that if you own something, you have the right to control that property. Now, we do live in a community where, zoning applies, and that's fine. When we talk about significant historical, atmosphere, whatever, that's a fairly vague statement. And I know in the comp plan, you don't want to pin it down to a specific statement. But my point is that when we say historical, well, that could be the Nouveau, or Art Deco, or mid-century modern, or a variety of other styles and designs. And we can't really come out and say, hey, you're going to follow Art Deco. We can't come out and say that you're going to do mid-century modern. We're just saying historical. Well, I understand the desire to keep things the way they were, but there still needs to be room in there for new things, new designs, new ideas. I guess where I'm going with this is I want to encourage preservation, but I don't want to tie the hands of the property owner. Because it is their property. They're the ones that spent the money on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Rolson?
I like this conversation because I think this what you got at, Councilmember Russell, I think is the statement that you saw that was pulled out is indicative of a couple of statements that I think we pulled out. And my sense of why we did it was because of the comment that Steve just made about property rights, because we didn't know where the line is. So I'm interested, and I don't know if we can do this, but I'd love to hear what you're thinking about that in light of bringing that back in, because it would be like your neighborhood and my neighborhood saying, you really can't do a second story, or you can't do this, that, and do you want to write that into this? Do you think that's the kind of regulation we're starting to suggest then?
I do believe in individual property rights, but we also do have zoning in areas, and I know there are some people in our area that are very upset about the 2 stories that have gotten in, and which now it has opened us up to 2 stories in that whole area.
Those are covenants, yeah.
Right, and so that because one person did it, now it's open. As far as 2 stories we bought there because we wanted a ranch-style home. We didn't want a 2-story. But if somebody next door built a 2-story or pop the top and put a 2-story on, some of those houses, I've seen a couple in walking in that area over there, and I think they look fine. The overall character, even though they've gone 2-story, still fits in the character of the neighborhood. And I mean, there's a house on Logan, I think it's on the same block of Swedish. It is totally, it's more modern. It totally is not in the character of the neighborhood. I'll tell you where I think the Shriners building and redoing that, I think that looks fine. All those brand new houses, even though they look like cookie cutter homes, they do, even though they're bigger, they are more in the character of the neighborhood. I'm not saying new, but it is kind of, I feel for like Cassandra and Jeremy Lechtemiller have a small home, and then all of a sudden they have these great big homes right next to them. I do think that's problematic.
So what do you think we have to do to keep that from happening? I mean, that is a properties rights issue. So
well, retaining the historical character to me is in that form. And going back to like where the Lechtemillers live, there was a change in zoning. That's why that happened. And that was not necessary. Joe doesn't think so.
I don't think there was a change in zoning anytime recently.
No,
Steve is...
Hold it.
Okay.
What she's talking about is the bulk plane was changed.
Yeah.
We already have a large area of lot coverage. You do the bulk plane, and now you've got the Titanic.
More room to grow. But, yeah.
Fair enough. Thank you for allowing the
Yours
correction.
in my neighborhoods, it was the covenants, which have nothing to do with the
Right,
city. So
right.
We've got neighborhoods like that too.
Right. So, and I mean, I can understand Arapahoe Acres, wanting to maintain that style of home in their area because all the homes and so
So when someone wants to come in and build a two-story, like Cape Cod there, what do you think the role of this document should have in trying to create? I mean, do you want our historic aesthetic guidelines to be so clear that someone couldn't do that?
No, I don't want it. No, I want it to be to maintain the historical character. That does set a definition. Here's what I want to protect from that I think has been happening in the city of Inglewood is we have developers coming in, buying up properties and changing it. That's different than homeowners buying that property to live in it and then they decide, oh, I want to change this. Because development has been driving all of these bigger houses or change in bulk plane or whatever. And I don't have an issue with wanting a bigger house, but I think there's a shift going on. Younger families don't mind living in smaller homes because really to afford it, they're going to have to.
Do you mind us going back and forth like this a
You
little
know,
bit?
I think what would be more helpful would be if Councilmember Russell suggested there was some character of neighborhoods language that you suggested. Where do you want that back in? I guess I'm just not clear exactly where you want that. Because I'm great with that language, that character of the neighborhood language. I think that's really great, and that's the language that's used in zoning and other areas as far as character of neighborhood.
Well, I think even in Goal Live 4, you could put improve community quality of life through enhanced neighborhood design and neighborhood identity while retaining the historical character and form of established neighborhoods. Just adding that last phrase on.
Adding. Can you read that language one more time?
Okay.
Neighborhood identity, and then it would add what on?
It would add on to it while retaining the historical character and form of established neighborhoods.
Historical form. I guess form is a little bit of an interesting word.
Historical character and form. I mean, that's up for interpretation. And so planning and zoning will probably make decisions based on the comp plan.
I think if it were just historic character, character of the neighborhood, then I feel like I would definitely be supportive of that.
Okay, so while retaining the historical character of established neighborhoods.
Thoughts on that language?
I do. This is kind of splitting hair, but are we talking current historical character? In my neighborhood, we had farmhouses at one point in time, and now we have something newer. I mean, it's the question is no, it's a slippery road. It's a slippery road.
What if it didn't use the word historic? What if it just said design a neighborhood identity and maintain community character of neighborhoods, of established neighborhoods? I'd be more supportive of something like that because I do feel like the historic form kind of, confused me as to exactly what we mean. But
in 20 years or 30 years, the whole flavor may change. The people change.
And I will say the language I'm suggesting leaves it a little more open for future interpretation than perhaps what Member Russell is trying to get at.
Along the lines of Councilmember Yates, and I do think it is splitting hairs because now the character of his neighborhood has changed. So you still can use the historical character of that neighborhood in context of what it is today.
So would...
Sorry. The reason we haven't moved on to another speaker is because we were still on Councilmember Russell's recognition, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Olson's, and we started.
Which I asked her if we could have a conversation
Exactly.
a little bit, but then I think we had.
Sorry. So this broad conversation is opened up under this choice. So right now, I would say that if you have comments under 4.4, Live 4, that's where I'm trying to keep the conversation until we get some resolution with that, and then we'll move on to other speakers. But I apologize. If you have something on 4 for any of the objectives under there, if you'd like to hop in at this time. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, fair enough. Please.
Let me tell you my problem, or my struggle, is that we have houses We had one on our block that was considered historical or, as the original farmhouse. That house was so bad structurally that the new owners had to tear everything out and rebuild. It just wasn't savable. I'm worried that we're going to, try to put rules in place where homes that should be replaced, we need to have the flexibility of a builder coming in, taking that property that's not functional, it's not safe, shouldn't be kept in the shape that it's in, and just to say, well, that home it's an older home and we should build to that character. I'm not sure it's true. I have an old shed in my driveway. Does the old shed become historical and I can't tear it down? I'm just using that as a silly anecdote, but sometimes things need to be torn down and rebuilt, and not everything new is bad. And I also have a problem with this council telling builders that they can't come in and improve a community or improve neighborhoods by tearing down some of the old homes that were tore down and new homes built, and saying that the character of the neighborhood is these old homes that needed to be refurbished. I'm just questioning, who determines what a character is? Do we define character? Does zoning define character? Does the neighborhood define character? I don't know whose job that is, but I think that's a discussion with zoning, and we need to define what it means. I like Doug's comment about a lot of the old Sears and Roebuck homes. There's some Sears and Roebuck homes, Doug, in pretty bad shape that I'm not sure we want to keep building onto them. What do we do with an older home that they want to pop a top or add an addition onto? If we do that, are we changing the character of the community? I have a real problem with any council telling any private property owner, which also is the owner of the property, whether they're a builder trying to build something new or anything else, that they can't improve a property. That's my struggle with this. Now, I know that there are some people in our community who like their quiet little normal, community. They don't want much change. But there are other places in our city that there are some homes that need to be tore down and rebuilt. There are some on Delaware. There are some on Fox that just need serious attention. I agree, the home on Quincy and Fox, or is it Quincy and Fox? I don't know how that got approved. I just don't. It's even crooked on the property. My OC goes by there and says, why didn't they straighten that property out? So I don't know, but whose job is that to define character?
I think maybe I can help with some of those. I think what I was trying to get at with the recommendation of character of neighborhoods is leaving that hard and steadfast rule, for another document or another body. When it comes to whether or not a new development, I think, fits in the parameters of character of a neighborhood. I think planning and zoning, I think this council has to make sort of that subjective determination. And when it comes to character of neighborhoods, there's a lot of factors, right? You got form, you got, the shape, you've got materials used, you've got lot coverage, all of these are major factors, I think, in whether or not something is or is not within the character of a neighborhood. And I think what we're trying to do is not restrict the ability of somebody to scrape and rebuild a property as long as they rebuild it within the, character of the neighborhood. And I guess I would argue that I'm not so sure that we need to hash out every rule for everything. I think we need to give some guidelines and get to that next level of the policy in a different document. And what I was trying to get at was at least try to provide some language that I think provides some, recognition of the issues that Councilmember Russell is bringing up, while still at the same time not restricting the ability of the private property owner to do what they want with the property as long within the confines of our local rules. Other comments on 4.8? I'll go back to Councilmember Olson. Did you have anything else?
No, I do, but I think Councilmember Barentine is next.
Yeah, great. Actually, I had Councilmember Russell next.
Actually, I think Councilmember Barentine has been waiting for a while. I just had a question about Rick's, and so let her go ahead, and then I'll.
You want me to come back to you?
Yes, come back to me.
Councilmember Barentine.
That's why I had your light lit up. The reason that the Lecta Millers came was because we lost the battle of keeping the character of the community when we had sweeping zoning changes happen over the last 2 years. outside of this comp plan, when you have the bulk plane, the setbacks, all of those issues that they came and complained about were exactly what got used to change the character of their community that they didn't want the previous council to do. It's the zoning that protects that issue. So we're kind of the cart's after the horse here. The reason that house got done the way it was is because council approved that zoning changes. And I don't agree with those zoning changes. I don't think anybody, certainly not in District 3, is against any new homes going in or improvements going in. But the setbacks, the safety issues, the drainage, the heights, the bulk plane, all of that has to be addressed in keeping, and in some ways something newer can come in, but still at least not stick out like a sore thumb being corner to corner on the sidewalks, which is exactly when we were going around running, that people had a huge problem with. And those changes came well before this comp plan. This comp plan isn't going to change those zoning changes. I would prefer that those zoning changes, we put them back, and that they were done in a way that kept the character of the community in at least some kind of modest way, so that something isn't enormous and using up the entire lot when nothing else on the block does that. We should be addressing those. But that's how that happened.
Thank you. Councilmember Russell?
Okay, this question is for Councilmember Gillett. That house that needed to be torn down that they had, did they tear it down and rebuild it?
My question is, do we have to tear down an 800-square-foot home and build another 800?
No. My question for you is, what did they do? Did they tear it down and rebuild a new home, or did they build it the same as it was? Or
Built a new home.
And that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. I just want...
But they didn't build it the way the other one looked.
No, that's why I asked that question. It doesn't, and I'm not saying that it has to be the way the other one looked. I'm just saying there is historical characters to neighborhoods, and I'm just suggesting that we keep it in the historical character of the neighborhood. They can build it totally different.
Again, we have to define character, and I think the saying character is a nebulous word that has no defined meaning to me, because it may mean something completely different to me than it does to you.
Hold on just a second. Can we ask staff perhaps for some guidance on that? It is a term of art. I mean, this is, character of neighborhoods is a term used in zoning and all these type of decisions. Is there any guidance you can give on definition?
It's typically not a term used in zoning, because zoning has to do with the physical, measurements, setbacks, height, those type of things. Usually when you have character introduced into a zoning ordinance, it's in terms of design regulations or design guidelines.
Such as, what kind of guidelines are you talking about?
Types of materials. It could be architectural style. A number of years ago, there was an attempt to create a zone district in Inglewood that had character built into it based on current standards. And at the time, earth tone colors were important, were all in vogue, and that was written into a draft of the regulations. It was a point system. You got so many points if you did certain things. And one of the areas where you would get points is if you designed your structure with earth tone colors. Well, that's like the length or the width of men's ties changes every couple of years. So if that were codified as a regulation, and suddenly the change of the color palette in home design changed, you have to go back and modify the plan. Now you can create, in terms of historic preservation, you can identify, in fact the State Historical Society has a manual that defines, I think it might be more than 20 different housing styles. That could be used as a basis if somebody wanted to modify their home but retain historical character. But those are usually separate from a set of zoning regulations which have to do with the use of the property and its relationship to other structures in the neighborhood.
I guess I think of those relationships and the setbacks and the bulk plan, all those things as a character of neighborhood issue. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to hear kind of that perspective that.
Character is defined by, for instance, if you want to use zoning criteria, a 25-foot front setback. There are a number of homes in Englewood that have side setbacks that were created when the zoning back in the 50s was created that are different than today. And so depending on how strict you want to interpret character in terms of zoning setbacks, for instance, if it doesn't match the setback of the house that was built in the 50s and you're proposing a house in the 2000s, the setbacks might be different. That really is a nonsensical argument. I only mention that because character, as Councilmember Gillett pointed out, it can be a very elusive term to define, and I think it's important that we understand that we do need to have some specificity in the regulations, not so much in the comprehensive plan, but if we have a set of regulations that define what the historical character is of the Centennial area, for instance. Most of those homes were built in the period of probably the mid-50s through the mid-60s, maybe even the early 70s. And as you drive down those streets, you can see a consistent character. Now, the regulation issue that you might have is, could somebody pop the top on one of those ranch-style homes? And would that, would that alter the character of the neighborhood substantially, that you would want to have zoning regulations or building regulations that would prohibit that? So your question is fair.
Sure, thank you.
How do you define character, and how do you put it into a set of regulations that are enforceable and one that the public will accept, and that doesn't hamstring the potential evolution, if you will, of the community?
Again, from my perspective, with no sort of legal definition in this document, in my mind, the character of neighborhood would be kind of this subjective thing that would take into account all of the things that we talked about, as far as, the things that I mentioned, the materials, the setback, the bulk plane, everything, try to take a fairly comprehensive look. And I think that it would need to be drilled down and more defined in another place. I guess I want to go back to Councilmember Russell real quick before, and say, to the language again, could you live with just, character of neighborhoods, or do you want the term historic in there? My initial objection was to the word form, and then you said, okay, how about just historic character of neighborhoods, I think is where you were at.
If we keep eliminating words, we could just go back to what we got.
Is that an answer?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
is that what you're suggesting to do, or no?
I'd like to see historical character in there. It is subjective. I think when I buy a home in a neighborhood, I've bought there for a specific reason, and I want that neighborhood to retain that character. And I believe that people buy in neighborhoods for specific reasons. I can tell you, I was very upset, and I know Councilmember Olson probably was too, when they wanted to build a 7-story building in our backyard, because it's a ranch home area, and it's not in the character of that neighborhood. Because there are certain things, when you maintain the character of a neighborhood, it maintains value. When you start changing things, you lose some of that value. So historic character, I believe, is subjective. It is not saying that you have to rebuild that house. Obviously, planning and zoning is going to use this document to work on things, and so I don't have an issue with historic character.
Do we want to weigh in on this one before we move on to additional speakers? If I could get maybe council members to weigh in on what type of language they would like to see. I think I've heard character of neighborhoods, adding historic character of neighborhoods as the main alternative. Do you mind if I just go down the line? Councilmember Barentine, do you have a stance on that?
The historic character that she's talking about, I think my constituents know what it is, and it's not when everybody else in the neighborhood's got a 25-foot setback and somebody else builds up to the sidewalk. That's not keeping with the historic character. when my neighbor 2 doors down wanted to build a porch, we all had to sign off on it, and everybody had a porch. Apparently they didn't know he was the only one who didn't have a porch, but we had to all sign off on it. When my neighbor on the other side built a garage and had to build it a little closer to avoid the XL pole, we all had to agree on that. We all had to say that building a little bit larger garage was okay with us because we have an investment there too. I appreciate the new people that are coming. I do. But they're coming because of what we created, because we built this a community that they want to live in, and so they've got to make sure they're part of that too. I mean, I don't want to take away from Misty and Anna
do you
that
mind
you
answering
met.
the question about the language? That's what I'm trying to get to.
I'm explaining to him what the
I don't need you to
character-
explain to them. I need you to answer my question about where we're at on
his
consensus.
question, and if you'd let me finish, please.
No, you're answering my question, ma'am. And the question
No, I
is,
had
what
the-
language
I
do you
had the
support?
buzzer. I will go ahead and I believe that the historic character is more than definable, which is exactly what I was talking about, and it's what I want in there, and I think that's the way what you were asking. But
Thank you.
I don't want. I am not interested in arguing with you, and if you don't like the point I'm making, then move on.
I am. Thank you. Councilmember Olson.
So I want to remind ourselves that Live Forward has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in it too. So whatever we do with adjusting the general 4 somehow has to make sense with whatever was 1 through 5. But I am fine with us inserting historic. I think it's very difficult to decide what that is. And I do think it's going to be this commission that we come up with to help define that, because I don't think that this document is our document. It's not yours, as sometimes we said it's it's ours. So we had to own it. It's what we want. I'm concerned that we're maybe getting too into the weeds on some of this. I don't know. I don't mind having historic in there, but I think it's very subjective, in that for me to decide that someone can't build I live in a mid-modern, but how do we get these residential buildings of historic significance defined in a way that's really clear? I'd like to.
You are supportive of
Yeah, I'm
historic
supportive of
character
it, but I
neighborhoods.
don't think it's going to make a difference either way. I think we still have to have it fleshed out in the next steps of this comp plan, and that the comp plan itself shouldn't have to spell all of that out. It'll be with the commission, and the council certainly has to decide, because the commission we won't give any power to without us. They only make suggestions, right? Sure. So, yeah, I'm fine.
P&Z's got some special
So
authority by the charter, obviously.
So tell me on the Goal Live, how you first, you submitted something with community character in it.
Yeah, I'm suggesting simply the language character of neighborhoods. Councilmember Russell's suggesting historic.
But where would you put that?
At the end of the sentence.
At the end of
At the end of the
neighborhood
sentence.
identity? I think
right after neighborhood
I think
identity.
that's where just grammatically it felt a little clunky. I don't know if there's a way to say it a little differently.
Again, I'm just trying to get an idea of whether there is consensus to edit
but I'm fine
it
with
first of
editing
all,
it.
and
I'm
then number
fine with
two, whether or not the term historic should be involved, and then we can wordsmith this out a little
Okay,
bit.
that's fine.
Again, my concern is that I feel like when we add historic there, that somehow things can never change, and so that's why I prefer character of neighborhoods. Councilmember Yates, do you have an opinion on this?
Ooh, I'm Russell. I'm really not in favor of using historical or character. I think this is about creating a historical boards and commissions, historical preservation. I think right now for us to go in there and say, hey, we want to, I just don't think it's right. I mean, we're tying the hands of the people who spent tens, hundreds, and in some cases now, close to $1 million in our community. So no, I'm not in favor of doing that.
Do you support the language as written, or as proposed then? Without any changes. And again, I'm talking about Goal Live for improve community quality of life through enhanced neighborhood design and neighborhood identity is how it stands. Again, Councilmember Russell suggested we add historic character of neighborhoods. I'm suggesting just character of neighborhoods.
I'm fine. I'm with 4 as
written.
Yeah, the line 4.
I'm for as
Okay, so we got
Thanks
two.
for tying me to the ground.
Yeah, no problem. I'm just trying to get us advancing the ball here. So we got 2 as is, we got 1 character of neighborhoods, and we got 3 historic.
I would do as is, I think, because I think the rest is down in 4, 7, 7 and 8, 6, 7 and 8. The historic part is there.
Okay. I weighed you on historic character of neighborhoods. Is that accurate? Yeah. Again, I think if we could get to just character of neighborhoods, I would support that. Could you guys support that?
No.
Well, then I will support as is. Let's move on then to, let's see, Councilmember Olson, I believe.
Oh, sorry, I think it was
No problem.
still up there. which is
Councilmember
last.
Barentine.
A character of a neighborhood without saying, giving it some kind of definition.
No, the consensus now is to leave.
Oh, I'm
Goal 4
sorry, you're
live as is.
dismissing me again. I apologize. Which one are we on
Nobody's
now?
trying to dismiss you, ma'am. I'm just trying to let you know where we're at, and that is at Goal Live 4. The consensus now is to keep the language as proposed.
No.
So with no changes. Councilmember Olson.
And with that, then 4, 6, 7, and 8 would stay the same? Or are you just asking?
That's what I'm hearing currently, yes. But I haven't tried to get consensus on that. Let's try to get consensus on that. Do 4 objectives live 4.6, 4.7, and 4.8? Should those remain the same?
For me, 8, the only thing is the create.
Hang on, I'll come back to you.
Did I miss something?
I'll come back
Go
to you.
ahead.
in just a
Yes,
moment.
come back to
Councilmember Barentine.
So
Question on the table is, should 4.6, 4.7, and 4.8 be the...
No, if we go back to the wording, the original concern about the wording on the funding and the incentivizing that started off this whole conversation still remains an issue on there. They're trying to say that they're going to leave verbiage in there to incentivize and historically significant without definitions and without understanding what those things are and where this incentivization and funding is going to come from. But anecdotally, they're going to tell us it's going to come from grants and other things from another agency, and nothing in here says that. So we haven't resolved that issue yet.
I agree. I would propose that we add the language of search outside funding sources, something of that nature, to suggest that this should be, at least initially, look for outside funding. Right now, I just don't feel like we have a funding mechanism for that, and so without giving some guidance on what that type of funding mechanism could be, in my mind, that leaves only one alternative, which is other people's money. Would you concur with that?
I wanted to hear some. He said when she did the original paragraph that the issue with that he couldn't do that the staff would have a problem with that is because they wouldn't have the set of standards or a way to enforce. Then what I asked for was, how are you going to do the set of standards and way to enforce what you actually have written in here right now? If you can't do what Councilmember Russell was suggesting, how in the heck are you going to do what you've already written down here? Because there's no set of standards or way to enforce or way to fund or way to incentivize either. So I was looking for some conversation on those, on how we were going to resolve those issues, because I feel uncomfortable leaving them the way that they are.
If you'd like me to respond, I mean, yeah, Councilmember Olson.
I think maybe we have a difference here in how we view a comp plan. I mean, obviously we do, right? So I don't think staff are the ones that are driving this. They're telling us how it's going to get interpreted, and that this is a policy document, not a strategy and nitty-gritty down to the bottom kind of document. And so I think that's where we're in some maybe...
Can I let you know why I said that? I'll repeat that again. And here's why that became a problem for me. Because when Councilmember Russell said, I think the wording should be this, and he goes, oh, we can't put it in the comp plan because then staff doesn't have a set of standards or a way to enforce. And I asked then, how do we have a set of standards and a way to enforce this currently? Because he was bemoaning that they wouldn't have a set of standards for that. So then we do have things that need to be defined that are in here. How do we set the standards for historically significant and enforce that? And how do we fund and incentivize? So it came actually from his explanation about why he shouldn't do that.
So I think there were two statements that you made, and one of them was the long one that you wrote that you read that was in at one time, and then there was another one that I think he was responding to, if I'm right, regarding what historic really means in this situation.
If you're asking me what historic means, I can't answer that.
Right.
It is somewhat subjective, and to properly categorize a neighborhood or a number of blocks in Englewood as historic, it takes quite a bit of evaluation and analysis by a group of people who have a lot more skill at that than any of us here sitting at the table. And I don't think we at this point can put that kind of language into the comprehensive plan because we're just not familiar with it. But in order to have a defensible, enforceable regulation that would come out of a comprehensive plan, you need to have a lot of background and analysis on what is historic about this particular neighborhood. Mm-hmm. What are the elements that make it historic, and what elements of a historic nature do you want to have other people incorporate into the development that they may be proposing? And we're not prepared to do that in this document.
Yeah. I think that's where we're having maybe some differences in the way we view this document. The second comment I wanted to make about this is that I don't read anything in 4 as requiring us to do anything. It's encourage and support in every single while, actually all the way through. So I don't think this is as binding as some people might want it or both want it or be worried about it. It's actually a very in-betweenish kind of language, and it doesn't require. So I actually was expecting people to want a little bit more either strength on it, we are going to do this, or not. But it's encourage and support. So I think we should be really careful about trying to. I'm talking to us, not you, as a group. As we own this, whether or not we feel like that's okay language to use, and it's not going to require us to have an historic designed set of guidelines of what from this document. It will come in the next thing that responds to this document.
And to finish answering your question, I agree with that piece of it. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was asking, how are we making determinations on things like historically significant, mm-hmm. so that we have some idea what somebody is supposed to be encouraging and supporting. And we do, you're correct, there's only encourage and support in there, but there is this feel that we're supposed to be funding and incentivizing this in order to have that piece.
Well, that will come through the next steps of this, which is done by neighborhood. My neighborhood would be different than the next neighborhood to the next neighborhood, Arapahoe Acres they're all very different. And so I think that's where the hard work is, to figure out collaboratively in those neighborhoods. Do you agree to a porch or not? As significantly silly that might have been. Those kinds of things maybe aren't happening as often as we'd like, or more consistently with everyone. And that's why things have gone up that others are like, whoa, how did that happen? So this document needs to help us be able to frame the next level of legislative or guidelines that help us say, we're not going to let that particular one happen. Or we are, because it is what we've decided to do.
And I guess I'm just saying I'm more comfortable if we have a little bit more understanding about what we mean by some of these phrases now.
And just to remind the council, we will be seeing the language for a historic commission or advisory body coming forward to the council relatively soon. And so I think some of those issues can be flushed out in that conversation as well. Not saying they shouldn't be here, but as well. But just FYI.
Some of that happen in the context of doing this?
I think it'll come forward before we approve this plan, certainly. When is it scheduled for?
Then that would be helpful.
When is it scheduled for? It's scheduled for the next few weeks.
It's coming up. I think it's I think it may be either the first meeting in November.
Yeah, so it's coming up.
But you were asking about number 8, though, right? I mean, that's the one we had the most trouble with. I think
I'll come back to 8 in just a second. Did you have anything else to add, Councilmember Barentine?
What exactly is happening in November? What?
We're bringing forth a proposed ordinance for the historic preservation, creation of the Historic Preservation Commission.
Because there's some things in here, as Harold has brought up, that if we're going to rely on the commission to be doing it, then I would like to do that in conjunction with that piece of it. Because if we're going to say historically significant, as as per them, or if we're going to give them that authority, but if we decide not to give that board that authority as we're going through that piece of it, then it's kind of silly for us to imagine that we're doing it here. So I just would like a little bit more knitting together of the two while we're doing this, because we're making comments that they'd be doing something, and we're not even sure that that's the way it's set up yet. So I just want to fit them together, and then we'll have a better answer to it. I wouldn't worry so much about funding if that was, or the incentivization. If we're going to put strong language in there that board is part of that, then that's a decision that we make. Then we can put it on the comp plan or we understand that's what's going on. But to just say it anecdotally just worries me. I don't know if I've made my answer to you very clear, but I hope you kind of understand something.
No, that was helpful, and I think that seeing that information come forward before we finalize the comp plan, we may have to. You may be right. There may be another step to come back to the language of the comp plan after we look at the historic preservation or the historic commission, if you will, because there may be some hanging issues there.
Point of clarification, Mayor, I misspoke. It's actually scheduled for November 28th as a study session. That's the earliest, I believe, that we could find a time to talk about that.
Okay, so not as quick as I thought.
The ordinance will come at that particular meeting.
But that's prior to, so that they could be established.
Correct.
When the other boards are going in. Oh.
Yes, ma'am. That's accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
When it comes to the funding issue, that's something that council's going to have to approve anyway in the budget. And I may have taken it down a rabbit hole we didn't need to go. I apologize. So I'm okay with the way it is right now.
Others want to weigh in on that specific language then of 4.8 on whether or not to add something that directs it to be more outside, or if we're comfortable with the language as is. Mayor Pro Tem, thank you. Councilmember Rolson?
I am too. I'm actually fine with all of these as is at this point. And I don't think that we have written in any other boards and commissions in any of the other things. So I don't think we have to wait for that. I do think we need to absolutely use that group. We have to decide we're going to have it, right? Some of us, I'm in for it. I'm hoping and looking forward to it, but not everyone agreed to it. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Valentine?
I just want to make sure that I'm not necessarily talking as much about the board weighing in on the comp plan as I am us understanding the role of the Historic Preservation Board as we set it up in doing the comp plan. And since it's gotten brought up numerous times about their role with this, I think it's important how we view this comp plan in conjunction with that board. So you've said that this won't pass before that board is created and we have that conversation. So I'm fine with it. Because we'll have to go back on these issues if something comes up that we didn't understand.
Yeah, I still think that to be the case. I was thinking that, I apologize, I was thinking we had it on a slightly earlier agenda than the end of November. But I think it's still going to be, yeah, exactly. And I think it certainly would be coming forward in that study session to us at minimum prior to the approval of the comp plan, certainly. But not 100% certain that we would hash through all the issues to approve that language of the commission formally prior to the approval of the comp plan. I'm not sure, those are kind of on different tracks. I'm not sure when they're going to get to the stage.
But I guess what I'm thinking is that a lot of them that are invested in creating that board are listening to some of the concerns and issues that we're dealing with in doing the comp plan and how that's going to marry or interact or intertwine with the role of that board. And so they may look at their role and their responsibilities or things they want to take on or not take on differently after these conversations. So I think it would be I think it's important. Because we're creating the board. I mean, I'm not saying that we should hand council's job over to a board, but when we're so heavily invested in what that board will do, as Harold has brought up so many times, I think that it's important as we're creating the board.
Sure, and we'll see that language, and we'll make those decisions as we move forward. Let's move on to Goal Work 1, and I'd open it up for comments regarding Goal Work 1 and Objectives Work 1, 6, 7, and 8 at this time. Huh? You guys want to take Goal Work on or not? I'm open to... Let's get some initial comments. If I feel like we're going to start to wordsmith this one, then maybe we'll pick it back up next time. Thank you for the reminder there. Councilmember Rolson.
Well, I back to my other comment, I'm not sure, maybe it does matter, but Goal 2, I mean, work and shop are the exact same as the live.
Just
Every
in different
statement
areas.
in different areas. Do we have, I mean, I think we could quickly go through this and say we don't have any problem with it being extended to these 3 areas, and then all we have left, if we all agree to that, is learn.
I was kind of hoping, but let's see if...
That's what I would say. I like these. I think they're good. I think we're going to have to work some things out, and I'm fine with it being applied to every sector.
Does anybody have major objections to that? Seeing nobody jump.
Wait, she'd have to repeat what she said because it was kind of sweeping and got it all done.
It's basically all the proposed language in the memorandum from staff going over Goal Live 4.
What I said earlier.
Goal Work 1.
No, I know. I just have to listen faster. I'm so apologize. That's what I asked to be redone.
I'm just saying it's the same thing. I wasn't trying to complicate it in any way.
I didn't think you were. I just wanted it reiterated, so I knew which. I wasn't criticizing.
Again, it's
just
basically all the
wanted it
language in
again.
that memorandum.
I don't know.
I didn't take it as
Seemed like it. I'm sorry. I still didn't get my answer though.
Yeah, sure. So let's stick with you. What is your question and/or comment?
Okay. So, Linda, could you just
Yes,
go over
so
again
I'm
what you
saying
were
that
saying?
what is written in Live 4, Goal Live 4, all 3 of those, 6, 7, and 8, are exactly the same statements in Work 1 with point 1.6 for the Work 1, and also the same in Shop for those 3. Okay. They're written exactly the same way. The only difference is what district, commercial, industrial, and the first we were doing was residential. It's just the exact same wording. So if we don't have trouble with them being applied in those 2 other areas, we can be done with it. But if we do, then we need to bring it out. What's the difference?
In order for what you're saying, then if we agree with 4, 6, 7, 8, then it's written, you believe, pretty much the same in the other ones.
Well, it's word for word the same, except for industrial versus commercial. So the question is, do they slightly change when you change the sector of the buildings? That's what the question is. And I don't see what they are, what the difference would be.
Okay.
So why wouldn't we encourage?
But it's all based on, what you're saying then is all based on agreeing with 4, 6, 4, 7, and 4, 8 as they are written right now, and I don't agree with them, and that's what we've been discussing this whole time, and I haven't had an answer to the questions I brought up before, so I'm confused.
I'm sorry, which questions?
Okay. What she's saying would be predicated on agreeing with the way 4, 6, 4, 7, and 4, 8 is written, and we've had, 2 hours worth of conversation on these 3 things.
We have consensus on that.
And haven't, okay. All right.
Do you disagree?
Go ahead.
Thank you. Does anybody have any amendments to any of those that they would like to offer, I suppose, at this time?
I mean, does anybody else see industrial and commercial changing anything at all in the way we'd want it? I've tried to think what would the difference be as you move one to the next, and if we're going to accept it for residential, what difference would it be different?
I didn't think of them as like the same priority levels. It was kind of interesting to see this approach, but I'm fine with it.
Oh, it's interesting because we hadn't seen it laid out
Totally.
side by side before.
Totally.
It's the first time. Thank you.
Well, and I think we tried to pick out a couple of these areas, when we were kind of going through it as well, but we didn't see specific language and specific links to the goals and objectives. So.
Yeah.
others want to comment on any of the proposed language or any changes to that? Councilmember Valentine?
So adding the historic character kind of thing, since we already decided not to put that into the 4647, and it can't be discussed again in any other place than either?
It can be discussed, but
okay.
you need consensus support is all you need. You're welcome to discuss whatever you'd like.
The whole document's done already then. I mean, the way that, all right, never mind.
Okay, let's then get off that. It sounds like we have some consensus to bring that language forward. I had a question, I think, about, what was it, Goal Learn 7 in red? What was that about?
Goal Learn 7?
Yeah, like everything was in green, right?
I'm looking at the top.
Edits.
Those are the goal and objective that council asked to be removed from the plan.
Oh, it's altogether removed. I just didn't know what red meant. I was like, green, I know what that means, but thank you for that. At this time, I think we can pick up this conversation at a later date. What, do you want to plow
Let's
through?
finish Learn 3.
What's that?
Learn 3. Let's finish Learn 3. It's only 2 statements. So I think that Councilmember Valentine does bring up an issue, though. So these are the ones we have put in to address the historical stuff, but are there any others that are missing? I think those need to be asked.
Agreed. I think that's we can pick up on that conversation as well. If there's additional spots that were not identified here. Sorry, Mr. Keck, did you have something?
No, just a question, Mayor, or just a point of consideration for the council. We have not set another time for the comprehensive plan, as we had thought tonight might have been the conclusion of the addition of that. So looking at future study sessions, it's looking rather full through the remainder of the year. However, we can probably carve something out should that be necessary.
Let's just finish up. We're almost there.
Let's go. But again, in order to finish this up, in my mind, we would have to get through goal, learn, and objectives under learn, as well as talk about, are there any other identifications of any other issues? I mean, do you guys want to have that conversation now? I suppose if nobody's got anything, that could be a brief conversation, but
There is, and we have to schedule.
yeah, fair enough. Okay, fine. Let's go through goal, learn. Is there language modifications on learn, goal, learn 3, or objective, learn 3.8 and 3.9? Goal Learn 3 is expand environmental stewardship and educational efforts to improve community safety, cleanliness, visual beauty, and civic pride. And then again, encourage and support under 3.8 to provide educational information to new homeowners of the historical significance of the city and their neighborhood area. Love the language of that. And the second one's more about the school district. 3.9. Councilmember Valentine?
Are we defining what civic pride is?
No, we're not. Certainly, it's not currently defined. I suppose if this council would like to define it, that is an option for us. But I don't believe it's defined in the document. Is that correct?
I don't know how they're going to enforce it then. I mean, I go back to what City Manager Keck said a couple of weeks ago when we were doing this, and that's that we have to be careful about putting the kind of vague things that we've got in here, overreaching, that are not definable and not enforceable. And then what's the point of them being there?
I think it's not an enforcement document. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Then
Then
what is it?
Vision than enforcement.
A vague vision that we can't define. Then it becomes kind of okay.
Becomes kind of what? Again, let's stick to the issue.
To answer your question, then it becomes meaningless.
Okay.
If it's vague and unenforceable, if it's vague, the sections that are vague and unenforceable that we aren't able to define, then they.
And that's fine.
I answered your question.
Exactly, and that's fine. And I'm just trying to move us forward. That's all.
Oh no, I know you're trying to move it forward, and we've had enough examples of late, especially this evening, of sometimes we need to know what we're doing and spend the time and have the conversation. But we'll get it done.
Councilmember Olson?
I really like these, and I actually like the language. I think it's visionary, but I think people know, just like historic significance and character, what that means to some extent, and it's aspirational. We'll define civic pride as we go along. Our neighborhoods decide what is civic pride for their neighborhoods. They decide what it is for our community, and sometimes we have opposing views on that, and I think that's okay. Same thing with visual beauty. It's just like aesthetics. People have different views, and I think we have to really be careful about creating our own personal judgments of what others' views of that is. But I like these. I like the wording. I think it works.
I'm supportive as well.
I am as well.
Thank you. Looks like we have consensus on Goal Learn 3 and Objectives 3.8 and 3.9. At this time, I think the next step would be, are there other areas in the comp plan that need to be addressed at this point? Are there other references to historical preservation that we would like to make in this document? Do we want to save that conversation for another day? Councilmember Olson.
I looked through these, and I don't see any others that live. We've got live, work, move, it doesn't fit, shop, learn. It seems like I don't know if play, I don't know where we put play, if there's, it just seems to me like we've pulled the right ones out that it would be most likely in and would add some more depth to for what we're wanting and what we've heard from the public. So.
And obviously, the next step is to get some feedback from the public. And, I suppose if the feedback is such, we may need to come back to the drawing board and hash out some of these issues. Councilmember Yates?
I think we're at a point where we've covered the document fairly well. We can always amend or add or change as we go on. But we've been working at this for quite some time now, and frankly, the community needs a document, and staff needs a document. It's just time. Let's wrap her up.
Set a public hearing on this?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, I hear you're in that same spot as well. I'd be good with that if there's no other major objections or feeling like things that we need to discuss. Councilmember Russell, did you have something?
I do have one thing that I would like to see done before we go to a public hearing, and that is to put the document together completely with everything that's written. 158 or 68 pages need to be put back together, because until the public have something to read, all of this is a moot point. So I'm not for setting the comp plan public hearing until after we have the document for at least a couple of weeks.
I assume that's the plan, right, for the public hearing, is to have a document for public hearing comments on, correct? Do you have any idea when that might be available?
It shouldn't take us too long to make these, probably a week or two at most, I would guess.
Okay, thank you. Do others support moving forward to a public hearing at this time? Councilmember Olson?
I do.
Thank you. That is consensus to move this forward, and we will bring it forward in a formal meeting for a public hearing. Councilmember Barentine.
I do support what Councilmember Russell is saying, and the reason we tried to set it to a public hearing 2 weeks ago, and then remembered at the end that we hadn't even included the historic piece. We had a document brought to us from staff and from planning and zoning that eliminated pieces of it, and again, as an example, X'd out the entire historic piece of it and became an issue. So I do agree with her that it has to be complete in the form that it's going to be voted on, with no additions or anything, so that we have something that the community, prior to the public hearing, can come and look at and give their feedback on, so that we've got that. That is important. So please be. I appreciate it that staff, every single time council goes, can you jump 20 feet high? And you go, sure, I can. And I know you try to get it done, but let's make sure that's a reasonable, doable thing. I mean, we've had some issues with the transparency of this and what got taken out and who took it out. So I just don't want to, going forward to this public hearing, have that kind of thing happen. Please don't cut yourself short, and let's make sure that we have it Because she's right, without us giving them enough time, that's not really fair.
I think we can get it done in a 2-week time frame.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson?
So then when would that be that we would be, it'd be the third week, it'd be 3 weeks then from now, right? That we would actually have it on the regular meeting? That's great.
Second November meeting.
Okay, great, thanks.
For the public
No,
hearing?
not November 2nd.
No.
That's what we're thinking. Would be November,
No, it's only a
I'm
week
sorry,
away.
November 14-ish? Does
Yeah.
that sound right? Is that our second meeting date?
So it'll be the following.
21, thank you. 21 would be the target date then.
That's great.
For the public hearing.
So you'd have the document done by what date?
Certainly
Have it
prior.
done before the publishing the Inglewood Herald.
Okay. And now you're saying you'll jump 20 feet high. So when is the publishing of the Inglewood Herald? You said it would take you at least about 2 weeks.
I think these gentlemen know how to do their job. They've suggested
I'm not
they're
saying they
capable of
don't. I'm
doing
just
it, so-
asking for the date so that I know that we've got the full 2 weeks for this public to look it over before the public hearing. That's all I thought we agreed to that. So I just asked when they'd have the document, what date that would be. I didn't think it was hard.
I believe that the publication requirement is 10 days for a public hearing, so 10 days before you set the public hearing would be the latest the document would be available.
Okay. And Councilmember Russell asked for 2 weeks, and I thought we had agreed that we could do that. So if we're changing that, I just want to know what we're doing.
It's up to council to
Let them do it.
I'm sorry, 2 weeks for what? I'm a little confused. What is the 2 week time frame you're asking for?
I asked for 2 weeks for it to be posted for 2 weeks so that the public had 2 weeks to look at it before the public hearing.
And again, I'd say that, I don't know, if council wants to support that, we can put an additional burden on staff. My suggestion is that we follow the legal requirement of 10 days, is my personal feeling on that. Do others want to weigh in on that, if we would like to respond to Councilmember Russell?
In all fairness, I don't think it's an additional burden on staff. Staff said they could do it in 2 weeks. The only difference is when we set the public hearing. So why would we want to rush the public hearing if what we're doing is giving people the opportunity to look at the document? So we don't want to rush staff. We would just move the public hearing out so that the public had enough time to look at the completed document.
Or we would move, their deadline up so that we could hear the public hearing on the 21st, I think is the alternative. So do other members want to weigh in on those alternatives?
Mayor, we always give 10 days for to me, every public hearing is important. This is important as well. 10 days is ample time and that's what we do for everything else. I just continue doing that for this.
And my thought is if we get it out sooner, if you guys have got it ready sooner, that's great. Councilmember Yates, you want to weigh in on the 10 versus 14-day request?
I'm fine with being consistent and sticking with the 10 days.
Councilmember Olson?
I am too. I think 10 days is what's required, and it would be unfortunate if we started to change the process, and then people say, well, why didn't you do that on ours? Why didn't you do that on ours? Or whatever it is. I don't know what. So I would prefer to stay with what our legal obligations are unless we want to change those.
Thank you. Councilmember Olson, did you have something?
Oh, that was to ask.
No problem.
Just
Councilmember Valentine?
How many pages is the comp plan?
I believe it's 158.
Okay. And I don't think it's a change in procedure to go ahead and allow that piece of it. I think that you have to have it noticed for at least 10 days. There's nothing that says that you can't have it noticed for longer. So I think that that's artificial. I don't know why you guys are rushing this or not allowing the public to at least have 2 weeks to look at this. I thought it was a reasonable request from Councilmember Russell. It's a complicated document, and it matters to the public. So I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but if it is to you, it is.
It's not that big a deal. Councilmember Yates?
I'd just like to point out that the only thing that we're really kind of changing is, well, we're not really changing anything tonight. So if folks have been really interested in it, they've been kind of following this, and they can look at the changes that we've made. So I still don't think it's a big deal. The document's been out there for more than a year. Yes, it's gone through some revisions, but I think, staff could probably point out where those last revisions have been over the past few months.
And my guess is staff is going to have it, way before the 10-day requirement. So whenever it's ready, please bring it out.
Can we do that? You just
Yeah,
go
oh,
ahead,
yeah.
whenever it's done, post it.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that'll add it'll get to at least 14 days. I'm just not comfortable putting an additional requirement on staff personally, and or delaying the process.
But you just did. You just asked him to come up with it quicker.
No, I did not.
Okay.
What do you suggest the additional burden is that I've placed on staff?
I thought he just said that you guys.
Enough.
Okay.
If we're not talking about this, can we go home?
Yeah, let's move on to Councilmember Choice. Councilmember Barentine brought up an issue. I just want her to have an opportunity to speak if she has a legitimate issue. Councilmember Choice, anybody want to kick us off tonight? Mayor Pro Tem?
First off, I want to thank council for letting me be gone last week. It was a necessary time off. And I, this weekend, went to the new Oxford Station, drove in, parked in there, and if you have not went to the Oxford Station, parked, and gone into where they rehab that building and look at the beautiful pool and everything that they've done there, you cannot see all the wonderful things that were done until you go in there. So if you have some time, go to Oxford and Navajo. You can just drive right in, and you will be. It is gorgeous. It is absolutely beautiful what they did to that area. I remember the old plastics, the Martin Plastics plant, and that was an eyesore forever. This is a beautiful, beautiful project. Take some time and go in there and look at that, and we'll hopefully. I know that they're already starting to fill up. I was shocked that they were already ready, but people are just. From what I hear, they're just loving the place, and right there next to light rail, it's become real popular. So I'm excited about what's going all over our city. I drove by Dartmouth and seeing our new Chick-fil-A, how well it's coming, how well all the new construction stuff is coming up, and we don't remind our city enough of what great things are happening in our community that really have brought some wonderful enhancements. I want to thank staff for being involved in that. No staff, you always get hit for things that people gripe and complain about, but I want to tonight thank you guys for all the wonderful things that you've done and helping move some things forward that have been real important. Harold, thank you so much for all the work that you've done, and there's just been a tremendous amount of staff work, not only trying to please this council, but trying to please our community, and I for one, want to tell you just how much I appreciate you guys for doing that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilmember Yates?
Last night I went to a gathering of Grace. Let's see, it's Grace, the Sacred Grace Church. They had a gathering over at the Inglewood Grand. I have to say kudos for the group. They've managed to work on some areas of Broadway and get property owners to take down the barbed wire and make it a little bit more appealing. And that's some wonderful community involvement. So kudos for them.
Thank you for that. Councilmember Roland.
You said Russell or Olson? Oh, I don't know why sometimes I hear. Do you hear Olson and we? Okay. A couple things. I was at the Chamber of Commerce meeting on Tuesday last week, and they have lots of events coming up, and so be watching. There'll be a flyer that'll come out soon with a number of things. They were very pleased with the job fair as well, and have some metrics that they're collecting around that. So hopefully we can get some of that to find out. I mean, besides 10 being hired by one, there were several others, but they're following up to see how, what impact it really did have on each of those that had jobs. But they felt good about it. Cochino Taco is on the corner of Downing and Hampden, across from Undici's Kitty Quarter. If you haven't eaten there, it's just such a fun place. It's just very good food. Happy hour from 3 to 6 allows you to get these entrees for really cheap. So really fun place. And I agree with the stuff on Broadway. It's Pilates. I mean, they should get the beautification award of all buildings. If to take what they had and create what they have now, I don't know if you've looked at it, it's like night and day. What is the block for that? It's like just south of Yale. It's next to
28, maybe?
Yeah, it's two buildings that were the most bizarre fronts, and they have, I mean, it's just like unbelievable that thing looks like it does now, so.
They're Catalyst program participants.
Yeah, they are, so, yeah, and they are happy campers to be here. They are so excited to get going on it, so I think that's it, yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Barrington?
All the businesses are pretty excited, and so are all the ladies at the Palango classes, too. So they still are trying to work on, apparently, Paul got his lighting more in the mid of the alley, but the end, before it turns, they don't. And so there's still, I know you guys are still working on that, but the front has been done. And with daylight savings coming, I mean, it's just packed. When I did the class on Saturday, there had to be 45, 50 women in there. And so they're all coming across. They're very excited about that there's something being done. And I greatly appreciate that you're working with Excel to try and make sure that we have some push and prioritization going on with that, both from the safety standpoint and keeping the businesses so that they know that we're supporting them. I went over to Zomo's, interesting couple. Been over there a couple of times. She's just a pistol. I think that thing's going to be amazing. They're not going to be open until the spring. So I heard at a mayor-manager meeting you were hoping to have our Christmas dinner there. I went over there and went, how fast are you working your husband? And she go, yeah, not that fast. So, yeah, he's over there digging all the time. So, and some really interesting stuff that Bob's is doing. Paul was over. I went there one evening this last week, and he must have had 45, 50 people in there as well. And the rest of the businesses are saying he's just a monster at being able to book events and stuff. So this mid-block crossing is really so very important to us. Both for the safety piece, because you still have people walking across there. So I appreciate the work you've been doing to try and focus on that, and if you tell Dave Henderson that as well. And I know, Harold, that you chimed in on some of the stuff with some of the council requests that I had done both on the traffic and some of the issues with the lighting, so I appreciate it. And there was another one. Hold on. Oh, and I needed to follow up on I do appreciate that we got the report for the sewer, but we do need to follow up on having a meeting. Councilmember Gillett, you were missed over the last 2 weeks, but just to catch everybody up that maybe didn't go to that, we had an agreement between the two cities, Littleton and Englewood, that we would go ahead and have another joint meeting, and that we would go ahead and get some additional questions from the councils that they had concerns on, and try to have a meeting before we have this mass exodus of a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of history, try and get some of these things squared away before we get the new people coming in. And I think I was talking to Doug Clark, and I think both of us kind of understood that we were going to try and have it before the end of the year, because a lot of changes are coming. So if we could follow through on that. But thank you very much for following through on making sure that the presentation was made available to us. I don't know if you're responsible for making sure Littleton gets it or not. That's their problem, I guess. I don't know. I can make fun of them and go, hey, we got it, and maybe you didn't. So just appreciate you following through on all of that. Thank you.
Councilmember Russell?
I also would like to thank you and staff for moving things forward in the 3400 block on South Broadway. Greatly appreciate that, and I know they do as well. So just want to thank staff. Thank you so much.
Oh, don't forget, Rita Russell and I are having our town hall meeting at Bob's. He was nice enough to let us use his meeting room. My coffee Friday, it became very apparent that people would like to have an evening meeting as well. And so I just made that happen right away, and we'll try and do something either once or twice a month in the evening as well as the twice a month coffees that I do for District 3, and hopefully pony up with some other people once in a while. So thanks for getting that out too.
Thanks, guys. I did want to echo those thoughts on the 3400. Really appreciate staff's making that a priority and moving that forward. I have seen some similar comments from the downtown businesses. I appreciate the council members' additional communication with the businesses there. I think it's helping the situation and getting us all to where we need to be down there. So I appreciate everybody's efforts, this team moving this forward on 3400. As far as the water and sewer meeting, I want to clarify, I guess, if we're planning on a joint meeting. I thought what I heard was that the information would come through to councils, that the council would make a determination whether or not we wanted to have a joint meeting, and Littleton would do the same. Was that your understanding, or I don't know, what was your understanding of whether or not we're going to have another joint meeting?
My understanding was that there was a desire for us to see if we could schedule another meeting once we had the information, passed back and did some research. So that's my understanding too. So if there's a discrepancy in that, correct me. I took a lot of notes that morning.
I guess I'm just wondering who made that determination, and I guess I'm wondering if this body should weigh in on that issue.
The people in attendance decided that they wanted another meeting.
I'm sorry?
The people that were that attended the meeting.
We're talking about the water sewer, not
right.
the power plant, right?
Right, the water sewer. The people that were there said that they'd like to follow up with those issues.
Again, I'm not trying to fight that. I guess I'm just.
I'm not arguing. I'm just putting it out.
This body making a determination of when it wants to meet, rather than one member making that determination or staff candidly even making that determination. So you guys want to meet again before the end of the year?
I don't think we said when. Just
sounds like before the beginning of the year is what the
Well, the
conversation
problem was that you have 4 of the 6 head managers leaving in early spring, and so we wanted to, and because the permitting process coming back up, so I think that's why everybody said we should do it before the end of the year. Before people leave, it's going to be pointless then.
Well, Mary Gardner leaves tomorrow.
Well, okay, we can't.
Not before her.
Okay, we can't. We knew we were going to lose a few on the side. That's fine.
Councilmember Olson.
Not everybody is leaving that quickly, but by the spring we need to have this, right? I mean,
Yes.
we know the dates on some of these.
Yes, we do, and staff is working with Hill and Robbins, for example, to get a legal analysis of the permit process, what we can and can't do. Actually, if we wanted to fight the permit process, that should have happened 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But there are some things that we can discuss. I know the biggest issue that was raised and talked about extensively that morning was the capacity of the plant and whether or not we need to keep that 50 MGD capacity or shrink that back somewhat. And we're going to be responding to that through 3 means, legal, technical, and operational. And once we have those things put together, we'll bring that back to the council, or maybe even at that point in time, see if we can schedule something. And Ms. Barentine is correct, or Councilor Barentine is correct. Dennis Stowe will probably be leaving in March timeframe. Jim Tallent's later on. Phil Russell, the midsummer of 2017. So people are going to be exiting. So it's a lot of transition.
So what I'm concerned about is that we have all the information we need for the next meeting. So do you think that that's feasible to do it in December? No. For the next meeting, yeah. But I mean, if people want to have it before the first of the year, that probably means December.
December.
Is January more realistic?
Potentially, yes. I think the difficult thing at this point is going to be to find a common time that works for both councils.
Might be easy if we started now to look at January and pick dates for everybody, because then the holidays are over.
Council. Mr. Yates, was your comment regarding this issue?
It was regarding the water issue, yeah.
Okay. I'm going to come back to Councilmember Yates.
During that meeting, I did bring up the issue about what kind of documentation we had for the transition of these individuals. I spent some time with the staff back there. They showed me what they had. Very impressive. If you want to know how to change your sock, it's documented, and it'll show you how to do it. So they've done a really good job at making sure that transition's going to go smoothly.
Councilmember Russell?
I was just going to weigh in that, yes, on the consensus to move forward the meeting.
Before the beginning of the year. Thank you.
Or right after the first of the year, whichever works.
Okay, you're open to either.
I got the impression that it was a timely matter for something happening at the beginning of the year with us making a decision on getting the options of what was going on with the permitting so that we were players in this whole thing and getting a little bit more information on the transition before the process happens because I'm sure that our city manager plans sooner than 8 weeks out to go ahead and hire somebody. So we need to, it was just a kind of consensus that we needed to do it sooner on so many levels, sooner than later, and get the information that was brought up at that meeting.
Okay, sounds like we have consensus to move this forward as soon as we can, hopefully before the end of the year. That's right. Yeah, we thought we were going to hit a nice restaurant. Maybe we could just hit the plant, you know? Councilmember Barentine, did you have anything else? Sorry, I might have just not turned your light off. Okay, then let's go to City Manager's choice.
I don't have anything this evening, sir.
Thank you. City Attorney's choice.
I have nothing today.
Okay, and we're adjourned.
Oh, no, you don't get a second bite of the apple.
You got a lot of stuff on our desks. That's not, anything you want to discuss there?
That was requested from last week, so I put everything I had together and what Eric had, and we put it all in a big pile and said, here you go. And then you should have received an email from Susan Walker, and that's got a bunch of zipped files in there, which was additional information that she sent just today. So that's not included in that.
Okay, we asked for
Well,
it.
can
so
I just clarify?
Go ahead.
This was, according to the mayor-manager meeting, what you said you were going to do was that everything that had been sent to council over this period of time, that you were going to make sure we had it all in one spot, except for what she sent today. That's what this is.
That's correct, and that's everything that I have printed off or what have you.
Because I just realized I don't have to. Some of it, a lot of it, I already read.
Some of it you may already have. Yes, that is correct.
Up today.
Save your own trees. We killed enough for you.
Okay, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
What do you do with that discussion over there?
With the what?
You play with things, you should know what they are.
Playing with what?
Discussion.
Oh, this thing?
What is that?
Yeah, I think this is just when they replace these, right?
No.
Huh?